Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku never had a quirk. If you guys enjoy this movie, comment down below, and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content and leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story Parsnip Sandsox from Al3. So let's start the video. He never could have gotten away. He doesn't think, even if he hadn't waited so long at the crosswalk to coo at the old baker's cat. Or if he had ridden his bike to school like his mom always tells him. Or even if he hadn't gone to school at all like he had the indescribable urge to this morning. He would have gotten caught. He'll be able to understand after, because he's a target. He's been a target no matter how far he went to avoid him. He would have been caught eventually in the moment. Though he's asking himself all those questions, wondering how he could have gotten out of it with his bottom lip wobbling and stomach roiling with nerves. Why did he let himself get caught? Why did he wait so long at the crosswalk? Why did he choose that day of all days to ignore his mom's advice? Why does he turn around and smile at the jeer being shoved through the back of his head instead of running? Burning red eyes flash through his mind as he staggers to a stop in front of his house. His fingers clamp over his shoulder, shadowing the paler hand that was there not 20 minutes ago. But he can't feel anything other than nausea as he presses down. No fire, no throb of pain. It's just they're hollow, like the headaches that are just hollow pain around his temples, but absolutely unbearable. The familiar feelings he knows should be there haven't kicked in yet, not past the initial shock wave that pulsed through his skin and rattled him all the way down to the bone anyway. He stumbles on the step to his porch, still sluggishly moving forward. His head won't shut up. Sparks, harmless, terrifying explosions out of pale hands and red eyes. It runs like a movie film burned into the back of his eyelids. Every time he blinks, it's his red door, the cracked strip of paint near the knob, then darkness and red eyes staring him down. Red eyes, jeering, red fire and popping and blistering heat too close to his face. He tries to keep his eyes open. They're dry and his head hurts, even if his arm doesn't. And he really doesn't want to have to use the eye drops that are in the cabinet. They're cold and always drip down his face. And it makes him feel like he's crying, so sometimes he does cry, and then that makes his mom cry. So he doesn't want that. He doesn't want it. He doesn't look at his right shoulder or the hand tightened over it, because he can still feel the burning and the stickiness and the char, but his eyes stay open. He reaches out for the knob, steps inside, and lets the door quietly swing shut behind him. Mama. He calls out as loudly as he dares. A step, and a frown comes across his face at hearing his own voice. But he can't help how raspy it sounds. Raspy, sticky, like he just finished crying. Was he? He can taste salt on his lips. When did he do that? Is that why his breathing sounds so wet and shuddery? He hasn't bothered to take his shoes off, yet his favorite red high tops are soaked in mud. And he doesn't think he could stand up again if he had to crouch down anyway. Mama. He says again, faltering. His voice is softer. He sniffles a hiccup tearing into his raw throat, and starts paying attention to the tears burning in the corners of his eyes. He is crying. He's not supposed to cry, not when he doesn't have anything to cry over. It's stupid and weak, and makes all the other kids at elementary feel gross with him. It's stupid. But his shoulder is really starting to hurt, and Mom isn't coming. Mama Kaken. Izuku heaves in a breath, already hating how his chest is getting tight, and that his head is fuzzy around the edges. Kaken, he hurt me real bad, and you said to tell you when did that, and he did it. He's never said that before. The realization makes him dizzy, like it physically sent the world off center instead of just his stomach. It also makes him cry harder. Sticky trails of tears and snot run down his face, too fast for him to wipe away. Are you home, sweetheart? Did you say something about Katsuki? Finally, his mother appears. She trundles down the stairs, mouth open to say something else, until she catches sight of him swaying in front of the door. She only pauses for a second before rushing over with a frantic look of concern on her face. Izuku, what happened? Did you and Katsuki get hurt? It's a little too loud, almost like the big voices angry people in the movies use. The sound echoing between his ears is much less funny than it was then. She kneels down in front of him, somehow not hearing how everything is buzzing and too much, too loud, too big. She's smoothing his bangs behind his ears, patting at his clothes like she always does, like nothing's wrong, and a big sharp feeling isn't building up in his throat. And it's all just normal. Soft hands flit over his face, gently brushing curls away, tracing over the bruise on his cheek. It's as relieving and warm as it is too much. He can't tell if he wants to clutch at her and sob or scream until it goes away. He decides he wants to wrap himself up in her. She smooths over all the aches and kisses them better. She'll help with the buzzing. Suddenly, her eyes flicker to his shoulder, to the charred remains of his school sleeve that's visible even around his small hand. Somehow he had nearly forgotten all about it. Katsuki, he? She doesn't even finish the sentence. Can't. Maybe one of her hands is clapped over her mouth. Now the other hovering just above his arm. They're shaking. Mama Kaken H hurt. He hurt me, Izuku finishes for her in a quiet, choked voice. You said to tell you if he did it again. And he mama, it hurts, sweetheart, I'm so sorry, she whispers. I'm so sorry, let's go to the bathroom so I can fix this shoulder up, okay? I'll fix all of this. He had placed the dizziness he felt earlier, while she was checking over him. It's a bone-weary sort of thing, one that crushes his lungs and makes his knees wobble. Clarity, relief. He finally told her, and Izuku keeps telling her the dam broken open. He blubbers and stumbles over every word. But he wails out how the teachers at school let Katsuki and his friends do all sorts of mean stuff to him. The relief pours into him with every example and description he gives from over the past few years, overpowering the guilt and tears. So he spills everything out of him until there's nothing left. Even though he thinks Kaken is super cool, he doesn't think past the now of how bad the burn feels. He still can't really feel it like he should. How the littler ones felt when he tells his mom. Her face twists up even more somehow, and she hurries to call the doctor people. She had him memorize it after the first time he broke his wrist at school, and they wouldn't tell him the number. She murmurs all sorts of sweet, reassuring babbles, while he cries after the doctor people hang up when he's finished spilling. And she's finished bandaging. They hold each other so tightly for such a long time that he begins to think they won't ever separate. He's sure Kaken will get a timeout or not be allowed any comics or action figures for a while, and he'll learn his lesson, and then everything will go back to how it was before the diagnosis. It'll be okay in the weeks and months to come. Izuku watches with a mix of despair and fascination as the burn on his shoulder scabs and scars over Mama and her nurse friends at the hospital keep whispering about how he might be stuck with a vaguely hand-shaped scar for the rest of his life, that it'll always bring up terrible memories, and that he might not be able to handle seeing it. He looks at it every morning when he gets ready. It's covered by bandages during the first few weeks of healing, but he catches glimpses when they get changed, and when he gets dressed the first week, that he doesn't have bandages on it all the time, and he can move the arm good enough to write again. Mom tells him that he's not actually going back to school yet, and they walk to school anyway, even though she says to leave his backpack at home. He puts his hand on his hurt shoulder, almost mimicking the way he gripped it when he came home that day as him and Mom go to his principal's office. She yells a lot, slides some forms over on the table, and overall seems very scary for a half hour or so. His principal signs some papers at the end of it under Mom's eye, pale and sweaty. And then they leave the school. You left for the last time, Mom had told him, a shaky smile bearing down. She squeezed his hand. You're not going back. I have some lawyer friends that are going to take care of it, sweetheart. They get ice cream. Instead of going home right away, Izuku has a scoop of black cherry and a scoop of chocolate, and Mama gets scoops of vanilla and matcha. He also has his hand on his shoulder. When Auntie Mitsuki comes over, his mom is mad. Then too, she's been a lot madder since crying in the bathroom. And after the doctors mumbled about nerve damage and colored scarring, and that they couldn't cover a FIS eCal, there's something. She was really mad when Uncle Masaru came by with Auntie the next day. And now they're all here, their usual roles flipped, with Izuku hidden on the stairs to listen. The adults have a conversation at the kitchen table, one that starts with yelling and ends in at least two of them crying. All four of them have ice cream together after the Bakugos calm down. Auntie likes cookies and cream, and Izuku likes Auntie, even if she's Katsuki's mom, and his mom said Katsuki isn't allowed to come over for a while. Eventually, he stops absently touching the scar on his shoulder when he has to listen to yelling, or when he gets upset over something. It takes a few months to get there. It takes more than a few concerned glances from his mother as it is when Mom decides to move them closer to her job and into a new school district. Izuku doesn't press on his shoulder. He didn't really like the temporary online school anyway, and he doesn't have any friends to stick around for other than Kaken, who he hasn't seen for a while, so he celebrates with her. when a key comes through the mail. Mom tells him that they officially own their new house now. He throws himself forward into her arms and hugs her as tightly as he possibly can to squeeze out all the nerves dancing around his stomach. Tears flow over his cheeks. A grin lights up on his face. And he doesn't let himself think about his scar for more than a second. He'll be away from his old teachers, away from Katsuki and the other kids, and he can start all over again. They'll be settled in right on time for his birthday too. At least he won't be missing anything for that celebration. He hasn't really had a party since he started wearing the red shoes, and had to leave preschool not since then. His shoes slap against the slick pavement, each hard push off punching another gasp out of his chest. The sound is covered up almost completely by the sharp torrents of rain beating down all around him. His lungs are throbbing, squeezing and pressing and tight, and too hot. He trips when he tries to push his soaked bangs out of his eyes and almost goes down. But he doesn't know if they're still following, or if they can see him through the gray sheets. If he goes down now, he'll stay down. And he can't afford to stay down, not with the rain stabbing his skin raw, and the rocks settled at the bottom of his stomach, and the shuddering coughing way he's choking in air. How he's leaving a trail of red behind him that's quickly being washed away. If he stumbled right into the ground and didn't get up, or if they took the chance to come back, he wouldn't stand a chance. The storm would wash up all the evidence his mama always tells him to make sure to leave behind, just when he thinks his legs might give out for the last time. And he won't be able to stagger up to his feet again, to keep running. A vague shape rises in front of him, looming up out of the storm, a playground. He thinks, though his heart is still pounding too hard, too fast in his chest, to really think right. He can find some muted colors past the gray at least, and the outline of some roofed in parts a refuge for, until he doesn't feel so foggy. It only takes a few minutes to lug himself up a little ladder and curl under the little roofed part, only a few more after that to convince his lungs to work, then to sit back against one of the wooden walls. There's a slide right across from it. He didn't notice when he climbed up there. He can see the rain good from back there through the opening for the slide. It's nice. He guesses he can't pull his gaze off it. His head is heavy. It's really heavy. He can't really move. But the rain is nice. Time passes. After that, he thinks, when he comes more into himself, it's because he can hear a disturbance in the storm's path to the ground, somebody moving through it, boots clomping through the wet playground turf and clothes slogging behind. He just has enough mind left to wiggle closer to the opening. Or maybe not enough mind, actually. Is this a bad decision? The back of his shirt doesn't want to peel off the wall. The jerky movement makes the somebody zero in on him. They call out a few times as they get closer. And when he doesn't answer, the clomping gets faster. Kiddo. Hey, are you by yourself up there? Can you hear me? A wheezy voice says to, well, probably Izuku. It's raining pretty hard. Where are your parents? It's coming from right below, its owner probably standing at the bottom of the slide. Even if they were trying to look up it, they wouldn't be able to see him past a vague blob. Can't see the nearly black-looking hair plastered to his neck and forehead. Can't see the bloody scrapes following his shins and knees. Can't see how he might have been crying, maybe. He doesn't actually know, but his eyes feel puffy. He doesn't shift from his spot, doesn't even look up, only curls further into himself, and hopefully tucks himself farther away from the opening again. He's still kind of trying to blink back into life, make all of his bones and muscles and everything work. If you don't want to go home right now, that's okay, but we should really get out of the rain. The voice coaxes. It stays gentle, though not mean or sharp. Neither of us need a cold Amorite. A shiver passes through Izuku's body, without him meaning to. After so long out here with the wind and water battering him, there's a chill set so deep into his bones. It might never come out. He needs to move. But he can't. This little hunched position. He has his aching knees folded up in front of him, arms tucked too tightly over his head, is the only thing keeping him together. We don't have to talk or anything if you don't want to, but I'd feel a lot better if you were somewhere safe. The man down there is cold too, isn't he? He has to be as soaked as Izuku is, but he wants Izuku to be safe. He's a stranger who's putting himself in a storm to check on a random kid. He heard crying. He carefully unrolls himself, the bleeding scabs on his joints creaking in protest, and half pokes his head out into the open. A tall, wiry man greets him there. He is sitting on the bottom of the slide, long legs awkwardly tucked under him on the too small surface. and it looks like he's trying to shield his phone from the rain. Straight pieces of hair darken to a brownish color, flop around the man's shoulders and stick to his neck. He has some of the longest hair Izuku has ever seen on a guy. He doesn't seem dangerous, though not like he'd kidnap an 8-year-old. At least probably. If anything, he looks like one of those posh model people that don't understand they can't approach a kid that isn't theirs. But he sounds nice. His voice is soothing and warm, and he doesn't look like he's going to go home if Izuku stays in the play structure. The man looks up and catches Izuku's eye. His own widen, maybe shortly flicking over the bruises on Izuku's face and arms, but a smile rests on his lips. It's the kind that means he won't ask questions. Izuku thinks like the nice workers at the corner store. A little sad maybe, but not pressing. Those kinds of smiles are always relieving to see. There's a store right down the block we can go to if you'd like. The man doesn't move to grab Izuku, and he doesn't sound annoyed yet either. Small place, cozy. If I can get my phone to work, you can call your mom or dad while we're in there. He stares down at him and wraps his own arms tightly around himself. He knows the store. The one with the nice workers who had a blanket for him the last time he ran through a storm. He does not quite know what cozy means. He's suspicious, just maybe not enough to care what happens after the ifs and buts. He's got backup plans, fail safes. That's one of Mom's vocab words if something goes wrong. There are the people at the store, the flower shop further down the way with red shoes sitting by the door, a few hidey spots he knows around this area. And if all else fails, he's small and quick, and you really can't see more than meter in front of you right now. He could claim he worries over it and thinks up all those possible getaways right there, while he's hiccuping and staring, and the smiling man is squinting back to see him. He'd be lying though, so the thought doesn't stay long. He always has a plan. Mom made sure of it after they moved. After he couldn't get away, he just doesn't do anything but make him a little less wary of weird situations. Now, if he told his mom that, she'd probably be upset. Izuku doesn't say any of this. He does study the man for a moment longer, though letting his gaze linger over the dark blocky shapes in the man's ears before nodding. He doesn't take the slide down, even though the man is hurriedly standing up already, but swings himself over the side of it, so he won't have to scoot past the other. His knees are unprotected by his shorts, and already scraped, so the impact makes his thin scabs open again. Oh, the blonde mumbles whatever it was for, or whatever he saw in Izuku's face. He shakes himself out of easily enough. I'll take that as an okay, little dude. My name's Yamada Hizashi, for the sake of our newfound friendship, and the store is only a couple minutes away. He doesn't want to leave. He doesn't want to have to talk about why it hurts everywhere, or why he was playing in the rain in the first place, or who made him all bruised and bloody today. Mom's going to ask, the worker people are going to ask. But he just won't answer. He's already decided not to. He's going to get out of the rain and wipe the snot and tears off his face, and he'll move on as if he never thought about staying at the top of the slide forever, even if they ask, and the nice man worries about him and his teachers look at him weird again. But he'll do it, go home and get off the slide. Even though he doesn't want to, so the man goes home and stops worrying about a random crying kid. Izuku decides that's the only reason. He almost opens his mouth and almost ducks into a bow. Stiff manners are deeply ingrained in him after all, but he manages to catch himself. Nice to meet you. My name is Midoriya. Izuku, thank you for your help. He knows better than to give a stranger his name, well, anyone his name. He's not proud of how his throat clicks and chokes him up every time he has to introduce himself. It's handy though, for when there's a stranger, lightning arcs down hot and blinding over the top of the school building next to the park. Yamada's back is to it. My mom's name is Midoriya & Co., and I can't find her. Please help me find the nearest police station or hero agency. Sir, he knows where he is. He knows his mom is inside their house. He knows where to go. He just doesn't want to. The flash of thunder in the distance is expected, coming far too soon to not be unsettling, and Yamada jumps straight into the air. When he hears it, he mutters something about hating storms under his breath, looking in a random direction, as if searching for the thunder before shaking himself off, and offering a hand out. It's bigger than Mom's, more calloused with thinner fingers, and without the mole on its thumb. Strangely, it's almost like an offer, not a demand. Izuku's eyes light up despite every logical thought, and the sourness swimming in his stomach. He grabs Yamada's outstretched hand. That's as far as he'll go. He'll hold a hand, let that warmth calm the aches in his fingers, and run away from Yamada's side. If he needs to, his grip won't be tight and Yamada's isn't either, so he can twist out if he needs to. Yes, this is fine. This way he can peer up at the blocks in Yamada's ears. The two set off in the direction of the convenience store. Without much more fanfare, Izuku eventually gives up on trying to figure out what the blocks are to pay attention to where they're going. The rain pelts down around them, seemingly growing thicker and sharper for every step forward they take. Soon enough, Izuku can barely see through the gray sheets pouring over the streets. The wind howling in his ears doesn't help much either. Neither of them can see much other than the glow of street lamps and traffic lights, but he only has to tug on Yamada's hand one time. When they walk too close to the street, and he stumbles off the curb, there aren't many cars or bikes along the road right now. No amount of windshield wiping or hazard lights could help in these conditions. Yet Yamada helps him right back onto the sidewalk with plenty of frantic apologies. Izuku may have tightened his grip on Yamada's hand. After hearing that care flood into his voice, he doesn't smile or talk or anything, of course. Not, but the sour swirling in his stomach settles. A little after what seems like hours, he finally spots a familiar neon sign. The bright kanji advertising new flavors of snacks flicker until one goes out entirely. Yamada breathes a heavy sigh of relief and steers them to the doors. If Yamada's steps become a little faster, after a bout of thunder attacks their ears, Izuku would politely not mention it. A cheery bell chimes as they push past the torrent and step inside. The lights are a little too bright, a little too garish compared to the dullness of everything outside. There we go. Yamada laughs, using his shoulder to wipe some of the rain off his face. Now we can warm up and call your parent or mom or dad, kiddo. Or both, I guess. He glances down questioningly. Izuku just blinks up at him. Yamada opens his mouth. Sir, please step away from the kid. Izuku frowns in confusion until Yamada's eyes find someone over his shoulder. He drops Izuku's hand quick in favor of raising his own in front of himself in a placating gesture. I didn't mean any harm. Of course not. Izuku finally gets a clue and turns around. A skinny teenager with the store apron folded over at their waist is staring them down. No, actually just Yamada. They're just staring at Yamada. They only check Izuku over with a glance before coming back up. But this isn't your kid, is it? And you pulled him through a thunderstorm with you. Without waiting for a response, they reach forward to tap Izuku on the top of his head. See, Mir, you're soaking wet. Izuku runs. He walks over to them calmly, and surely his hands naturally find their shirt while he shuffles behind them. So what? Maybe they scared him for a second, acting like that and glaring like they're trying to explode Yamada with their mind. And to be honest, they have the same mom voice his actual mom does, which he really didn't want to go against, even if he wants to explain that Yamada isn't an enemy. They've babysat him a few times, let him sit behind the counter and spin in the chair after school until mom could pick him up, which is apparently plenty to gain a mom voice. He can't help but hide behind them, clutching to the ties on their apron like a kid. The two adults exchange a few more vaguely terse words. Yamada, even trying to catch Izuku's eye to smile at him again, he just eeps and ducks out of view. He can't handle peeking out when Yamada does end up walking out, making a mess, water still dripping off his clothes in buckets, no umbrella in sight. The bell chimes behind him, a gust of wet wind rushing inside. And then he's gone. The store is a small one. The employees really just a group of 6 or 7 people that take turns stocking shelves and running the counter during their shifts. They collectively taught Izuku all about not telling strangers anything, how to be safe when he walks home or plays outside, what to do if someone says something weird to him. It started shortly after Izuku moved to the area, when a woman tried to take him to her car. While he was picking out chocolates for after dinner, one of them stepped in. He can't remember which one specifically. And then it just became a habit to drop by sometimes. Now the 2 workers there right now do ask about the bruises and cuts, and the gum ground into his hair. He knew they would. But he still shifts in the spinning chair, uncomfortably trying to think about how to tell them without telling them. After a minute of clearing his throat and trying not to choke on the words, he releases his lips from between his teeth to answer. There were a few people at school picking on one of his friends. He decides on friend. He didn't even know the girl's name. He still doesn't. She had pretty sparkly blue skin and gills on her neck. Those kids were making fun of her underneath their patterned umbrellas after breaking her plastic one. When Izuku stepped in, already shivering and muddy from splashing in puddles, the girl ran without a glance backward. Good for her, really. If he would listen to his mom more often, he would be her. Sometimes he wonders why he can't be. Tells himself to run away next time, grab a teacher, or make a distraction that doesn't make his entire body sore for the next few weeks. He still knows he won't. He doesn't think he has it in him. This playground is really meant for the preschool right next to it. Or maybe for the little kids at the elementary down the street too. But Izuku keeps going back anyway. His favorite spot to be in is next to the huge blue slides entrance. It's the only corner of the play structure that's boxed in with little plastic walls. He didn't know any of that until after he came back, though. Bright pink rain boots on and water fuzz clinging to his hair. Most of the other walls outside his box are actually bars, many that branch into things to swing and climb on. He doesn't really like to play on the swings, or use the climbing bars or seesaw, or anything else. Not when there's no one else to play with. Playgrounds aren't very fun anymore. He doesn't think, yet he keeps coming back. Yamada seems to be doing that too. The second time Izuku sees Yamada before Yamada sees him, the blonde. And yeah, Izuku can tell for certain that Yamada is blonde, now has a bag tucked under his arm, and a leather jacket hugging his shoulders today. He strolls past the playground area with only a glance over its equipment. The reusable bag he has is marked all over with stickers and smiley faces and smudged pen. It's well-loved, Izuku thinks when he's staring at it with something warm in his cheeks. There's a carrot peeking out of the top. Is that what Yamada was doing when he caught a kid in the rain? Grocery shopping. Maybe he lives in that stretch of nice houses behind the playground. There are a few neighborhoods lining the streets back there. The man continues on his way, never noticing the curious green eyes following him. Izuku sees Yamada more often after that day. He stays inside during the next week's continual downpours under the watchful eye of his mother. But the sun has to brighten past the clouds. Sometime or another he goes to the playground to calm down and nurse a few tears. The Monday after, it's a beautiful afternoon. Pleasant warmth in the air, a cool breeze, barely any blood on his knees. Mom really likes weather like this. She'll probably have the windows and back door open when he comes home. The nice smell of sugar and roasted chicken filling the house. Right now he sits at the top of the slide, for once fingers loosely draped on the handlebars. While he stares out into nothing, he doesn't really have to think about anything up here. Not his quirk, lack of a quirk, or the kids at school, or the kids at his old school, or anything else. He doesn't want to think about. That's nice. It's really, really nice. Then Yamada passes by some 20 or 30 minutes later. He's on the same side of the playground as last week, heading the same way with the same leather jacket on this time. He catches sight of Izuku and pauses. He doesn't have a bag today. He tucks his hands into his pockets almost cautiously as he slows to a standstill. It doesn't seem like he knows he's being watched back. Yet a long tense moment passes, tense for Izuku at least. Then he ambles over, lips easily curling upward. Hello again, you come here often. His voice is just as bright and joking as it was last time. It's almost comforting how the genuineness in his words wrap around Izuku's mind. Maybe you go to school here, yeah? That one must be a joke. The school in front of the playground is a preschool. Yamada must be joking, right? That's why he's smiling. Except his face is tight around his lips and brows too. His steady gaze passes over Izuku. And the cuts and things on him, right? Of course, the cuts and bruises are usually what people are concerned about before they see his shoes, and how he talks about every quirk, except his own. Izuku tilts his head in a so-so gesture, own expression neutral. Probably he isn't smiling. And the other kids say he looks a little too blank when he isn't smiling. Sometimes how is he supposed to talk to adults again? Is he still considered a stranger? Strangers don't come back, do they? Yamada hums, settling down at the bottom of the slide. He turns to look up the slope of it this time. Instead of sitting sideways, his smile doesn't waver at Izuku's silence. Sorry for coming back to annoy you, if you're annoyed, that is. He continues, weakly rubbing a hand over the back of his neck. That cashier sure thought so. Are you two friends? Family? Close? Izuku nods and holds up a finger. Friends, better friends than he, and the kids that made some of his cuts and bruises better friends than Izuku. And the guild boy. Yamada's eyes keep drawing back to the one nasty cut on his cheekbone. Izuku can cross his legs under him and tuck his arms into the gap his legs made. But he can't hide his face very well. Yamada doesn't say anything about it. Though not like his teachers do they always feel more mocking than concerned. But this not stranger just seems happy to talk to at Izuku without mentioning the bruises. He rambles on, occasionally asking a question about Izuku that can be answered with fingers or a yes-no motion. After some time has passed, and the sun is a little closer to the horizon, Izuku is offering grunts and other little noises as well. He's not relaxed exactly, though his entire body isn't threaded with tension. Either the mostly one-sided conversation fades into a lull, eventually Yamada finally running out of things to say. That's when Izuku takes his leave. He swings himself over the edge of the slide much like he did the first day, stands up and walks over to Yamada, just like the first day, and offers a quick smile. Then he's jogging past the edge of the playground, following the street lamps that aren't all quite lit up yet, and running home. Their pattern continues. It becomes a habit, then a vague schedule, then a fact of life, one of those simple things Izuku stops bothering to wonder about. After a while, Izuku can usually spot Yamada first, since he gets to the park right after school ends most days. So he can choose whether or not Yamada spots him back somehow. For some reason, he always ducks his head out, or sticks his legs over the side of the slide, or slowly starts tossing mulch to the ground. The weather gets cooler over the weeks. He switches from shorts to pants on the weekends. And still their pattern continues. Mom knows about their conversations. She worries a lot over it, so Izuku doesn't let himself feel guilty for keeping Yamada a sort of secret. It's nice. He likes Yamada's voice and funny hair, and the husband he's mentioned once or twice. Yamada makes him feel warm. He talks about his hobbies and job a lot. After he said something about having a work partner, Izuku pieced together that the cat-loving snob from work and endearingly frustrating roommate is said husband. Yamada talks a lot like an adult who doesn't talk to little kids much, so Izuku writes down all the big words he uses to ask mom about later. He's got a whole notebook dedicated that's one of the big words to words and definitions. It's really nice, maybe nicer than letting his mind go blank and letting his fingers absently trace over the bumps on his arms. He even starts speaking when prompted to. After routine visits like this, Yamada couldn't possibly count as a stranger. The reasoning doesn't always work, and sometimes there are days where all Izuku can think about is how he's keeping his quirk a secret from Yamada. But the tightness in his throat won't show up most of the time. He can talk and joke and tell Yamada about his day, or about a new hero's debut that's nice. It's better than what he had before. Then one day, he stumbles to the playground later than usual. It's a Wednesday, Izuku remembers belatedly. He hates Wednesdays. He has a bloody nose, sticky tear tracks running down his face, and a colored slip of paper burning through his pocket. They hit the edge of the playground boundaries at nearly the same time that day. And since he's staring so intently at the ground, he doesn't see Yamada coming. "Oh hey there, little dude," he exclaims, reaching up to steady Izuku by the shoulders. "Are you all right there?" Izuku throws his head down again, chin slamming into his chest with fresh tears rising in his eyes. He can't see through them anyway, so why did he look up? "Go away, go away, go away." The hands don't move from his shoulders. "Sorry, I'm sorry." His throat clicks, and he bites down so hard on his tongue that the taste of copper fills his mouth. It's all ruined. Yamada has seen the other bruises and scrapes, all of which could be put down as a kid's clumsiness, and some of it was from that. But this can't be explained away. He already has to talk to mom about the note in his pocket from his English teacher, and what Hana-sensei said. Now this fragile little thing they had is all ruined too. Hey. Yamada crouches down, sliding his hands to either side of Izuku's neck. "Look at me, please." "It's okay, I can help, kiddo." "I'll help. Look at me," and take a big breath. Obediently, Izuku does take a gulp of air, the breath shuddering in his chest. Was he not breathing before? And chances a glance through his gnarled hair. Yamada's eyes are dripping concern. The tightness is back around his lips. But it's more in concentration than that silent type of pity. "Great job, kiddo," he says gently. "Want to take another big breath?" "Here, I'll do it too." They suck in a huge breath together, Yamada purposely sounding like a whistle, and the dizziness creeping into Izuku's head recedes. Somewhat. He doesn't laugh, even though that's what the funny noises are for. But he breathes a little easier for them. After a few minutes of this, the dizziness is gone completely. Little sobs still hiccup out of his mouth. He pulls his shirt up to wipe his face, feeling unsteady on his feet, and mostly ready to break into sobs again. He's so tired and his nose hurts. He doesn't want to do this anymore. He doesn't want to have to give up Yamada. Because he knows about the stupid bullying thing, he just wants to go home. We'll get you home all right. Promise, Yamada murmurs to him, words soft and rounded, and hiding a lilt of surprise at the ends. He starts to pull himself to his feet, staying half bent over to be closer to Izuku's height. Was he saying that out loud? He didn't mean to say that out loud. Do you usually meet your mom somewhere? Or do you know how to get home? Yamada stays oblivious to the vague thoughts flowing into Izuku's mind this time. Does he really not care that he has to comfort Izuku like this? Does he not care that Izuku's too soft to deal with those kids himself? Kaken cared. He cared a lot. Snippets of almost ideas, almost worries, almost cries whip around his skull too quickly to catch on to the colors start to blur around him. But he has to breathe or Yamada will get upset. And the pain forms a pulse of its own. And there's tacky blood smeared across his cheeks. Now so Izuku brings them to his house. He can't think of anything else to do. He meets his mother just at the door, where she's pacing and frantically pulling her shoes on just inside. Overall, Izuku doesn't look very happy or healthy. Yamada apparently doesn't look as kind to mom as he does to Izuku when there's dried blood on his fingers. And the school would have already called her about how he skipped his last class of the day, then didn't come home, as she knows she wouldn't know that he had skipped a little more than the last class, that his last period teacher would have been the only one to care that he was absent, and that the man at her door she's never seen before didn't kidnap her son. He probably should have expected his mom to scream and pull the toaster to her with her quirk. He also probably should have expected Yamada to scream in turn and duck to avoid the ancient toaster being thrown at his head. Izuku probably should have expected a lot of things, and he usually does try to consider all the possibilities before doing something stupid. But all he does now is burst into sobs and throw himself at his mom. She continues to loudly threaten the blonde man kneeling on her welcome mat, even while holding him close to her chest. This is Yamada. He has to shriek as more kitchen appliances fly towards them, choking on his own breath and too long hair. Yamada, mama, Yamada. He helps, stop it. The kettle falls at his feet and mom is shaking. No one's yelling anymore, but she's shaking, and she pulls Izuku away from her chest, just slightly, to look down at his face, suddenly switching from screaming to ignoring Yamada completely. Her eyes are all blown wide and puffy underneath, cheeks flushed red. And she's breathing as hard and erratically as Izuku as they cry together and clutch at each other's clothes, her pretty green eyes darting across his face to take in every detail. Feather-light, trembling fingers come to brush his bangs away from his brows. Before cupping his cheeks, the motion makes his tears fall a little slower, has his breaths come in a little more calmly. Whatever she finds must satisfy her, since she picks him up in a fluid motion and rises to her feet. He clings onto her chest like a koala with his face buried into her neck. Burnt sugar and the smell of the hospital rises up to meet him. She tucks an arm under his thighs, his short legs swinging near her waist, and bars her other arm across his back to support her child's clinging. She's already turning away from Yamada, as if he isn't there anymore, other than the quick furtive glance in the man's direction, of course. Mom's eyes rake over Yamada, nervously taking in every rumpled detail in one look. Izuku simply relaxes in her hold and curls his arms underneath hers. My apologies, Yamada-san, she says, voice clipped and hiding the shakiness living inside her fingers. She strides into the kitchen area. There are guest slippers in the cabinet at your right. Please join me at the high rise when you've composed yourself. She doesn't set Izuku down once she starts gathering stuff for tea. The closest she gets to it is when she raises her hand to pull the kettle back to her. A pleasant hum passes through her chest when they hear Yamada yelp that makes Izuku giggle. He's 8 now and independent, and he can take care of himself. But he doesn't complain or pull himself out of her shirt whatsoever. Her breaths are a little too shuttered and shallow for his liking. Once the pot is on the stove and nice glass mugs set out, Mom carries him to the bathroom. They have plenty of practice with the medical kid, so he's cleaned and patched up just as Yamada stops fumbling around with the guest slippers. It only takes a few minutes for him to smooth his hair down and slip out of the main hallway. Afterward, the two are stepping into the kitchen's other entrance at the same time. Yamada carefully takes a seat at the counter-island table facing into the kitchen, something anxious and pained on his face. He's a very fearful man. Izuku has noticed any confrontation, and he just blanks out. So his mom sets the 2 mugs of tea on the counter, one in front of him and one in front of the chair she takes across from him. Izuku shifts in her hold to turn halfway towards Yamada. But other than that stays silent, he's still trying to ignore the tingly feeling the alcohol wipes left on his face. "My name is Midoriya Inko," Mom says somewhat sheepishly to Izuku's ears, maybe seriously to anyone else's, resting her hand on Izuku's back. "You have been speaking to my son." Yamada startles and straightens up in his seat. He's as stiff as a tree. "Yes, ma'am. Midoriya and I found him in that storm last month. And we've crossed paths since then. I swear I've meant to speak to you sooner than this. But I wanted to make sure Izuku-kun was okay first." The two of them trade stares that Izuku doesn't quite understand. Mom's eyes go wide, then shrink almost guiltily, and then some realization crosses her face, and she's suddenly looking at Yamada in a new light. He's seen enough of her mood changes to catch the mix of gratitude and disappointment in the press of her lips. Because of all that, he's only a little surprised when they trade nods. Mom just says, "I know he can be well, he protects himself, and then sometimes he forgets to stop with new friends. He told me a little bit about you, though, so I know you didn't mean any harm. I sincerely apologize for earlier." Mom readies her eye on Yamada, and Izuku can only guess what expression she's making based on how pale his face becomes. "But if you ever stroll into my house with my son's face covered in blood again, I don't think I'll have it in my poor heart be nearly as accommodating before getting the story out of you." As Izuku glances at her face, she flashes a dim smile. "We're clear on that regard, yes?" The relief that then pours from Yamada is so thick that Izuku is tempted to try to touch it. A vigorous nod disturbs the relief cloud. Mom nods back, her smile loosens, as does her grip on her son. "Wonderful, I'm glad we could understand each other." Yamada supplies helpfully. Hisashi. Mom takes a drink of her tea. "This is Izuku. He said he hasn't spoken to you much yet, so forgive me if you already knew his name. He does prefer for you to call him just that." Izuku blinks owlishly in turn. He hadn't told Yamada his name, has he? It just wouldn't come out when he tried. "How long have he and Yamada been talking again?" Her voice steadily morphs out of the one she uses for telling people off while he's wondering about it. "I thank you for sharing some kindness with him this last month, truly." Yamada risks a warm glance at Izuku. "Of course, Midoriya-san, he's a rather kind child himself. You must be proud." "Yes, my Izuku is going to grow up and help a lot of people." Mom's tone grows wistful, bittersweet almost, until she turns back to her cup. "He has a habit of making friends with just about everybody, so please again forgive my caution earlier." She takes a last sip of her drink before sliding Izuku off her and setting him down in the chair she was using. Her hands aren't ringing together despite the mortified flush in her face. But that's only due to the mug she's still gripping like her life depends on it. Izuku quietly chews on the apple slice he was slipped as she makes her way around the counter. "Well, Yamada-san, I believe you, and I should get to know each other. We didn't meet in a very, appropriate way. But there's no reason to not continue properly." It's said as more of a command than a question, really. And if he hears it, Yamada surely does too. "Though I fear I may have a leg up in that department due to Izuku," Mom murmurs, thoughtfully cradling her mug close to her chest. The final decision Yamada doesn't know as such is set out. Even while she heads to the living room, bits of her usual softness return to her demeanor. With every step, Yamada is quick to scramble along after her. She offers him a seat on the couch, where Izuku can still see them both from the kitchen. A quick, kind smile tugs on her lips. "How are your cats doing?" Mom doesn't politely threaten Yamada again, as they talk much. But they do talk long enough for Izuku to get restless and wander up and down the stairs for a while. Boundaries that will be set regarding Yamada and Izuku's future interactions, casual personal stuff that actually relates to getting to know each other. And then they end up spiraling into shitty American cooking shows. Overall, a good talk. Considering how the two met, which is great. It's perfect even. Yamada leaves an hour or so later to catch a train somewhere, and Izuku hides on the staircase. As he does, he's tired and can't scrub the tingles and phantom stickiness off his face. There's no way he'd want to walk Yamada out like that while cleaning up for bed. Mom tells him under no uncertain conditions to immediately run home when he gets a bloody nose in the future. She doesn't press too hard on where the bloody nose came from though, and so he does not tell her. Point taken either way. Never stumble injured to a park where a random man has the chance to find out where he lives. Don't do it. Izuku, on the other hand, regarding school, and the cause of that bloody nose, Izuku's still trying to figure it out. The new school isn't worse. Really, it's better in a lot of ways. After they moved a prefecture or two over, he had a brand new school district to explore, and mom wouldn't have to be on the train for so long to get to work. His teachers are nicer. There are classes that teach about respecting all types of quirks that everyone has to take, and a lot more of the kids have weird or useless quirks. There aren't nearly as many bullies, is what he means. Most of the people at school, kids and adults both, are respectful, maybe not friendly exactly, but respectful. He doesn't have much to complain about, so he doesn't a lot of the time. The scrapes and things mama worries over just come from playing rough and being genuinely clumsy. There might be a specific group of older kids that like to seek him out and steal his toys, but they're not that bad. He gets to play a little rougher with them, when before he might have been shoved over his desk or down the last few steps on the stairs. His lunches are misplaced, when before his juice would have been tossed down his shirt. So it's all right. He survives. He enjoys his lessons and simply tries to please the one or two teachers that don't appreciate having him in their classroom. Quirkless kids are still rare, of course, and there's a difference between teaching a girl who can occasionally conjure a pear and a boy who can't do anything special at all. He doesn't blame any of them. He likes school. A few mean kids that make him cry sometimes won't change that. Midoriya-kun, come meet me in my office before you head to lunch. The one and only person he fully allows himself to dislike is his English teacher. Hana-sensei is terrible, flatly, blandly put. Terrible. Izuku has had to tolerate her for months now, and he is absolutely willing to voice just how much patience that requires. She's terrible, and he doesn't like her. Still, he meets her in her office, instead of staying in the classroom to eat lunch with everyone else, because she asked him to, which is terrible. You can take a seat, Izuku-kun, Hana-sensei greets as he steps inside, nodding at the chair in front of her desk. We need to discuss something. Her little office room doesn't fit much more than that huge wooden desk, and some picture frames on the walls. She sits behind it in a padded chair looming above the student unfortunate enough to be called in by her. Izuku takes the seat offered and nervously folds his hands in his lap. Hana-sensei is big on sitting properly and having good manners, being silent, and still she crosses her legs, smoothing down the fabric of her blouse. Did you give the slip to your mother yesterday? At that, Izuku does. Still, he doesn't even breathe. I never received a phone call or email. And you didn't come into class today with a returning note either. I'm sorry, Izuku mumbles back, his hands ring together. I forgot to tell her. As soon as the words are out of his mouth, he cringes. Too quiet, too shaky. A new wave of sourness flushes into his stomach. The note is probably still in his uniform pants after Yamada took him home yesterday, and they all talked together. Izuku went straight to bed. He was tired. And he's still tired, and all of his panic over that note had washed out of his mind. Forgot? Izuku glances up so fast. The note I wrote you was about your poor behavior and education. Hana-sensei seems close to fuming. Do you understand, Midoriya? You picked a fight with some other boys, and while no harm came from it, your mother, and I need to talk about consequences. I didn't start it. It comes out as a mutter under his breath. Izuku pulls and twists at his hands, staring resolutely down at them. There is no reason to mumble or to be upset. She replies, polished voice almost passing as comforting. You started a fight with some boys that were just talking about their quirks. Jealousy is not becoming of. I didn't start it. Izuku tucks into himself, defensively hunching his shoulders the way she hates. But he can't clamp his mouth closed in time. I didn't. They were using their quirks on my stuff, Hana-sensei. A quick light laugh pierces his ears. Izuku doesn't look up, only hunches further down, even though the gaze on him sends shivers down his back. This is why it is important for you to send the note home, Hana-sensei lets out a sigh, her sudden burst of amusement silenced. Lying isn't very nice, Midoriya-kun, and neither is rancor towards your classmates' rancor. What? Why does she talk like this? You're not listening to me. Something bitter and hot curls up in Izuku's chest. It lets him sit up straight, lets him attach his nails to the skin of his arms. Lets him meet Hana-sensei's eye. You're not listening. He jerks himself up to his feet, barely registering the old plastic chair clattering to the floor behind him. There are too many ugly thoughts rushing through his head, too much heat rising into his cheeks, too much of everything and anything bubbling inside of him to just sit there. I already told you what happened. His voice is rising past its usual nervous murmur, twining with the acid, swamping the back of his tongue, turning into a blubbering yell that sounds more like a shriek. I told you, and you didn't believe me, and you believed them even though my papers were all burnt up. They had this same conversation yesterday. They had it. She didn't listen to him. He missed lunch completely, and he couldn't manage to sit through all of his classes before running out of school. Too many of those older kids saw him through the windows. Too many were on break or doing something for a teacher. He did all of this yesterday. He stayed shaky and meek. And now he's not. Her voice is always so. She talks at him like he's stupid. And he can't handle it anymore. The only thing he remembers after that is the fear that was lodged inside of his chest, cold, rocky fear that he hasn't felt in a very long time. And then the loud slammed opening of the door, and a shout that's still ringing in his ears. Yoi-sensei. Yoi-sensei, come in here. Miss Hana's beating up a kid. Come over. Izuku has his hand firmly clamped onto his shoulder during his stay outside of the principal's office. His fingers can't be driven enough into his shirt for him to feel nails on top of his burn. The uniform material is thick, his grip weak and trembling at best. And he can't feel the raised edges of the handprint on his shoulder blade. He can't feel it. But he can feel the thin, dried lines of blood on his forearms. He can still feel the ghost of a wedding ring grinding against bone, the tight ridges of fingers crushing his elbow. He can't feel it. But he can feel everything else, and he's losing his mind over that. He's trying and failing to take comfort in a scar that came about because someone hurt him. He really must be losing his mind. He's already lost it. He's slipping, dying, falling, losing his mind. No, he can't do that. He has things to clear up. He can't fall apart. Yet he has to make sure he won't be expelled. What does he even have that he can use to help himself? He was screaming at a teacher. They attempted to calm and restrain him. And he's going to be expelled. Mom's going to be so incredibly mad. His breaths come in short and sputtered chest, heaving with the effort to keep himself contained. He finds his free hand coming up to press down on his arm again, hovering precariously over the lines already. There abruptly his eyes raised to flick over the room's contents. If he lets his nails down, it'll hurt worse than the first time he scratched. It'll hurt worse. And he can't do that. It's a small room just like Hana-sensei's office. But this is clearly meant as a waiting space. There are more chairs. These are comfortable, not rickety, and wooden lining the walls. No big desk, and a side table on each side of the room. He's never been in here before, which is strange, maybe, but he does try to avoid going to the principal's office. 4 blue chairs in total, 2 on each side, 1 table with magazines separating each pair. Yes, right? This is fine. He's not in Hana-sensei's room anymore. Should he still be calling her sensei? She's the only teacher he refuses to think about without that tacked on to the end. She really shouldn't have instilled those stiff and tight manners into her students. The chime rings, signaling the end of lunch, and pulling Izuku out of that train of thought. He doesn't react to the noise other than a furtive and habitual glance at the ceiling. This is fine. He'll be fine. Expelled, maybe, but it's always too cold in this school anyway. His breaths haven't evened out yet, though. His fingernails are pressed into his skin. Not scratching. And there's a door, the one he came through on one of the walls without chairs. The opposite wall holds a counter, and behind that counter is, well, hell, probably the receptionist lady had pulled Hana-sensei into the hallway behind the desk counter. That was almost 20 minutes ago. Izuku thinks that the area back there, the one immediately cut out of view, leads to important administrators' offices. He doesn't believe that. He thinks hell is hiding back there. The boys from the classroom down the stairs told him so. The chime ends one of the windows across from him, the only one not covered tightly with blinds, and a curtain flickers. Strangely, there shouldn't be anyone outside, right? Then the entrance door opens. It pulls his attention away, and when he glances back, the light flows in normally. He does react to the open door despite every part of himself screaming at him not to, by hunching down in his seat. Both of his hands drop like they were touching fire and land in his lap. The kid takes a seat in the chair across from him without a word. They barely make a sound as they sling their backpack to the ground beside them while he risks a look. Because he can't help it and almost physically startles at the shock of Purple waiting to meet him. His eyes are back onto his hands quickly enough, watching them twitch and react to the silent asphyxiation thing he has going on right now. A shock of purple hair, half-lidded violet eyes to match, and skin pale enough to frost someone else over. If they look at it for too long, the image of the kid burrows into Izuku's mind without him asking it to, poking at the folder he's reserved for his classmates. Purple seems vaguely familiar, though he can't get a grasp on why. He's surely never seen them before. He would remember hair like that. But Purple doesn't feel like a perfect stranger. Either he takes a second glance before he can talk himself out of it, only to meet Purple's eye. They both look away in an instant, faces flushing. Midoriya. Izuku? A meek voice calls out. He staggers to his feet, sweeping his backpack up with one hand, and practically runs to the voice. The receptionist lady attached to it widens her eyes, but she nods and opens the little half door connected to the counter for him to pass through. Your mom will be here shortly, she murmurs to him as he steps in. An expression suspiciously close to sympathy twists her lips down. I'll take you to the principal's office to wait, sweetie. She lets the half door swing shut, then gestures for him to walk beside her right before they reach the part of the hallway where their sight of the waiting room cuts off. The receptionist pauses to offer a vague wave towards Purple. Han. Yes, hello, your guardian is still speaking to the Quirk Studies teacher. Have him sign the paper on the door, then you're both free to leave. Have a nice day. Neither of them stick around to hear a word of assent. Izuku ventures down into the depths of hell with this receptionist he's never seen before, and he rethinks if he's really okay with being expelled. He's not, obviously, but he just got his heart to stop threatening to burst, and for the cold crawling sensations to lift from his skin, so he has to pretend that he is for a little while longer. This will be his first principal's office trip, excluding the one where Mom threatened his old principal, but will likely not be the last. Unfortunately, the principal does not speak to Izuku other than a surprisingly genuine greeting, and to inform him that they'll have a discussion later. As in, when Mom shows up, he has Izuku sitting in front of a desk, while he sits behind it with another chair pulled up beside Izuku's. There are a lot of brightly colored posters about anti-bullying, learning numbers and letters, and various older kid clubs and fundraisers. It almost makes Izuku's head hurt. Hana-sensei is sitting in one of the chairs against the wall with her arms crossed over her chest. There's a neon pink cupcake club poster tacked to the wall above her too. Izuku didn't know they had a club like that. Do they even have a room with ovens or kitchen stuff in it? Why's he never seen it before if they do? That sounds so cool. I'll wait. Hana-sensei is sitting directly behind him. Hana is sitting. Izuku doesn't look at her after he cautiously folds himself into the chair. Her stare burns into the back of his head. The entire time they wait in silence. It only takes 15 or 20 minutes for Mom to rush into the room, bag swinging wildly at her side. But years pass by under his skin once they're all settled and Mom has a comforting hand flat against his back. Principal Omuro leans forward in his seat and clasps his hands together. To start, I am very sorry on behalf of Hana-san's poor behavior, he says, voice just loud enough to reach their ears and just soft enough to make Izuku relax. Young Midoriya-kun is not facing any trouble or punishment today. And those words make Mom relax too. Omuro shifts his gaze directly to her. Midoriya-san, I called you in today to discuss Hana-sensei's behavior. He was approached by her an hour or so ago and manhandled. This time, a loud, disgruntled noise from behind them interrupts Omuro's line of thought. He sends a truly shrill look to Hana-sensei instead of deigning her with a reply. As I said, he was grabbed around the arm and then smacked. When questioned, Hana-sensei mentioned that Midoriya-kun started a fight with some boys yesterday. She tried to speak to him about it, and he got angry. Izuku shifts in his seat, stomach roiling into a torrent. All eyes go to him at the small movement. Midoriya-kun, you're in no trouble, but Hana-san is very insistent about this fight. Omuro's face is soothing, a stark contrast to the cool reprimand he flashed at Hana earlier. Could you show us the note she gave you yesterday if you have it? Shame burns deep into Izuku's cheeks. He nods regardless, throat tightening at the mere thought of responding out loud, and he digs into his pocket. It's right there, exactly where he shoved it as soon as Hana gave it to him, a small colored slip of paper matching the stack on her office desk. The words would probably be branded on the back of his skull, considering how many times he glanced over the paper. If he could read all of them, it seemed so important yesterday, so life-changing, the idea that he was being blamed for fighting some rude kids. That he would get in trouble for not fighting some rude kids. Omuro takes the slip from him, murmuring a thanks, and skims it over. He slides it to Mom next, and reads the contents aloud for the room. To Midoriya, Izuku's guardian. Your son has been experiencing behavioral issues, especially concerning the other quirked individuals of his class. He started a fight with others, perhaps due to an imbalance in how he is treated at home. He disrespected me and his classmates by denying his part in the fight. Izuku decides to make a game out of finding how many words he won't understand. It doesn't help calm his stomach, or the sharp pain growing behind his eyes. Omuro leans back, chair squeaking in protest. He recites the last bit with the same detached calm. He had the entire meeting. It was comforting in the beginning the way he wouldn't round off his words, as if Izuku was a toddler. But now it almost feels cruel. Contact me immediately to discuss what further action needs to take, and he is a quirkless child, a young one at that. But that is no excuse for disrespect and jealousy in my classroom. Izuku fades in and out of listening after that. They go on to discuss Hana's terrible choice of wording, how neutral classmates defended Izuku in the situation when questioned earlier, and a few other details. He grips the sides of his legs tightly enough to ache, pinning his hands there for the duration of the conversation. Not expelled, not in trouble, not expelled. He's not being expelled. He won't have to explain to Mom how he messed up so horribly in less than 3 months that they'll have to change schools again, and Hana won't be teaching him English after today. If need be, the entire class will switch teachers, or he'll be transferred to another room during that period. No more burnt papers. His other teachers call out quirk usage during breaks. He's swimming through a daze. But he can understand that and rejoice in that. Almost in a daze, Izuku follows her as she leads him out of hell and out of the school building entirely. Omuro rises to see them out until they reach the receptionist lady's counter, offering his own bow and appeasing words, while Hana stays where she is. Purple is gone by the time Izuku and his mother exit the waiting room. One singular distant thought rattles around in Izuku's empty skull during their entire walk home: not expelled. Woo-hoo, God, does he wish he was. Sometimes he jerks his head up to catch Mom's eye making a face at the phone against his ear. She simply smiles in encouragement. Then she turns back to the stove trader. Hi, Yamada. This is Izuku. He feels like slamming Mom's phone against the counter or his head. Do you want Mom? My mama asked, are you free tonight? We were making Korean stuff, and you said you liked spicy food. The voice on the other line stays quiet, only faint static coming from it. The prospect of tossing the phone and sprinting away from the heat coating his cheeks seems more and more appealing as the seconds tick by. This is worse than the principal's office visit. Well, maybe not, but it may as well be. And it does only take a few seconds before Izuku is scrabbling up and off his chair at the counter, running into the kitchen to throw the stupid little thing at its owner. Sorry. He shrieks into it, short and quiet and hoarse. Mom said we both had a long day, and that you seemed nice and why you'd be good with all smiles. And you wouldn't care if I burned the rice again. Have a good day, bye. No, wait, Izuku, I'd love to eat with you. I'd love it, don't hang up yet. Yamada manages around his laughter. He pauses, phone already halfway off his ear, and one hand tugging Mom's skirt. He pauses because Yamada sounds like he's crying. Not sick and sad tears where his voice would be choked up, but the other kind where he's just nasally, and the tears are light with giggles. Still chuckling at himself, Yamada sniffles wetly into the phone. Izuku can hear the grin on the man's lips before he speaks. I would absolutely love to. He repeats his words, becoming muffled for a second as he wipes off his face. Ignore these crocodile tears, little dude. I'm a happy crier. I can be over in half an hour or so if that's all right with your mama. That's perfect. Mom smiles down at both Izuku and the phone, which was apparently loud enough for her to hear this whole time, and wipes some grease off on the apron folded over her waist. A feather-light warmth bubbles into Izuku's chest. He presses himself closer to her, tucking a smile inside his collar. It almost distracts him enough to not hear her next reply, or how she replaces the silent phone with her hand. 30 minutes. That's all, just 30 minutes. Mom's letting Yamada come over in 30 minutes. His quirk must actually be charming people, not the loud quirk he claimed to have. And the one Izuku has taken a few pages of notes on already. Mom barely agrees to Auntie coming over for dinner. Unless she or Izuku had a really bad day, Yamada must have won her over during their long conversation yesterday. Or maybe she thought to invite Auntie Tsuki over and realized she couldn't, and decided that she still wanted company. Maybe, but it doesn't matter anymore because he's coming over in 30 minutes. Mom gives Izuku's stubby little fingers a squeeze, a sad smile on her lips. Was he mumbling again? Not letting him get sucked back into his thoughts, she presses a kiss on top of his head and sends him off into the living room. Go play with your toys and pick up any messes. She calls behind him. A nice sizzling sound from a lifted lid follows his way out. And remember your manners when Yamada-kun gets here. Yes, Mama. Izuku crows back, gleefully bounding onto the rug in the living room. He tumbles down to his knees, as gracefully as he cares to, scuffing up the plasters on top of them. He has plasters all over his arms too, so Mom had let him change into his favorite pair of shorts and a comfy t-shirt. He snatches up his pile of toys, throwing most of them into the toy box, and sets out the rest in a line. Mom doesn't like looking at bruises and things, and he doesn't like to see the sad look on her face. So they both agreed to cover everything in All Might plasters when they can. Will Yamada be worried about the sheer number of fun colors swamping Izuku's limbs? Maybe he's the same way as Mom and prefers seeing the plasters instead of what's underneath. And that's why Mom let Izuku stay in pajamas. He sets up his Endeavor figurine at the end of the rug. Now done fiddling with the bandages and steadies All Might in his hands. Maybe Yamada actually likes his hero-themed things. He spied some nasty-looking bruises and cuts tucked under Yamada's weird leather clothes too. And once the white bandages were scribbled over in All Might colors, he doesn't wear any hero merchandise like Izuku does. But he makes fun of their catchphrases and things of the sort all the time. He must be one of those undercover adult fans. Izuku grabs his present Mike figurine and throws it against Best Jeanist, knocking down a line of civilians' cheap army figurines. A few mock battles later, and an instance where the crack in the floor tries to take Endeavor's head off. A knock on the door jars him out of his play. Mom reaches the door half a second before him. She's tugging off her apron and smoothing down her clothes, while unlocking the door and also stealing glances at what's on the stovetop. Izuku absently mumbles that she's really good at multitasking, which she whispers a thanks to, and lets her hand drop down. He grabs it with both of his own hands, of course, the action letting his nerves still before they can truly start jittering around. The food on the stove isn't quite done yet, so he tugs Yamada into the living room as soon as he has slippers on. He catches Mom poking her head out of the kitchen to check on them. Every few minutes, he doesn't do anything, not even pause whatever he's rambling on about at the moment, except flash small grins back. So she doesn't quite trust Yamada all the way. Then that's okay. After the flying appliances thing, he didn't expect her to. What was that? He turns his attention back to Yamada and tilts his head a little. That's a good question. Actually, what was he talking about again? Oh, right, there he is. I was wondering why your husband never, He falters, then twisting his hands in his lap at the look on Yamada's face. Never walks with you when you pass the playground. Sorry, was that rude? This time he's the one to poke his head out. No one's looking back. He was surely talking loud enough for her to hear, so it must not have been that rude if she isn't doing that screwed up face thing at him. Yamada shakes his head wildly, his own hands reaching out to rest on top of Izuku's. No, don't worry, it wasn't rude. Though he looks more curious than happy, face a little pale. How did you know I had a husband though? I don't think I ever told you that. Izuku blinks up at him. Never told. He must have said it at some point or Izuku wouldn't have known about it. He doesn't want to say that out loud, though it's disrespectful to make someone look stupid. His teachers tell him that all the time when he gets the answer right in class after someone else didn't. And when did Yamada say he was married? Is it disrespectful to explain what Izuku thinks about to remember the husband man? Probably not. It's probably okay. He pulls his hands away and tucks them under his legs, turning to face Yamada fully on the couch. You said you have a partner at work. He starts carefully to make sure he doesn't stumble. And both your work partner and roommate leave coffee mugs everywhere. They both have black hair. Your work partner keeps losing his wedding ring necklace. But you found it on top of your fridge, and you talk about him every time we see each other. Yamada stares at Izuku as some of the color returns to his cheeks. He doesn't say anything during Izuku's pause, so the boy reluctantly continues. It seems important to explain this well, even if it's time-consuming to do it so slowly. Auntie talks about Uncle Masaru a lot too, and she doesn't realize she does it. Like you when you said you were married her? Izuku backtracks, brows knit together. When you participated in a wedding ceremony a few years back. He decides on, you also said that you adopted a Bombay cat right after leaving. 'Cause it looked like the husband guy. But why would you have a cat if it wasn't your husband? That'd be a little weird. He purses his lips to get rid of the ache in his jaw. When he's done, it's strange to have to explain his own mind like that. Not many people ask him to. Those things just connect, he guesses. And automatically tied up to the conclusion of husband after a while. But Yamada still isn't saying anything. His placeholder smile is quickly turning amused, though those little lines are still around his mouth and brows. How much more does Izuku need to say? Embarrassment crawls up his neck like wildfire. You thought it was funny, and he hated it. He tacks on dutifully. And Bombay cats are black, and your roommate and partner's hairs are black too. Oh, and I've seen a ring necklace thingy under your shirt before. Are you okay? Absolutely, little dude. Has anyone ever told you that you are one very clever kid? No? Are you sure you're okay? Mom sticks her head out all of the way, this time most of her torso included, and calls them in to wash up as soon as Izuku is on his feet. And off the couch, she tosses an apple slice at him. He takes it in stride, popping the small thing into his mouth, and turns to the now standing Yamada expectantly. I promise I'm okay. The man chuckles, patting the top of Izuku's head. He's smiling now, at least his teeth are so white. They reflect off the lamplight. Freshly reassured, Izuku leads the way to the kitchen sink. He explains that they have to wash their hands and pass out bowls, while Mom wipes down the stovetop. But it's okay because their chopsticks have heroes on them. He mostly forgets about the other things since Yamada said it was all okay as they sit down to eat. The Doctorating asterisk is amazing as always, which Yamada is quick to pick up on. Both of the adults pleasantly ignore how Izuku shovels the food down his throat. They also start up a conversation about how much sugar and hot sauce are needed to make a balanced recipe. Instead, Izuku just thinks they should all make it the same way, so he can have it at restaurants. He doesn't like the way they make it at restaurants. That turns into discussing types of hot sauces. Oh, I use that spicy Buldak sauce Izuku loves eating, usually just use chili paste. Buldak could be, until he decidedly stops listening to things he doesn't understand. He swirls his chopsticks in the sauce. As he thinks back on all of Yamada's ramblings, there's plenty of stuff he said that Izuku didn't understand. It felt like the man was telling a story and forgot that Izuku wasn't there for the beginning of it. Sometimes after so long, he just figured out where the beginning was through other stories. He briefly stumbles upon the knowledge that his mother absolutely knows just as much as he does, if not more, since she was the one that helped him piece a few bits together. Then he brushes it aside since he already knew that his mom knows lots of stuff. It's an interesting day when someone asks him how he knows something. Yamada has made a lot of interesting days, a few facts of life like his favorite color and song Yellow, and a pop rock song so forgettable that Izuku doesn't remember its name were specifically told to him. But he can't recall exactly when. He learned a lot of other stuff like how Yamada just started teaching and has other jobs on top of that. He just pieced it together. Or guessed, maybe. Is that why he seemed so worried? Did Izuku guess something wrong and Yamada was too kind to correct him? Oh, don't worry, Yamada-kun, he does that sometimes. Is it really all right? It doesn't seem like he can hear us. He glances up dully, realizing he had dropped his chopsticks onto the table. There's a rounded sort of static, stealing their words from his mind. As soon as the voices float to him, his jaw hurts like he had been clamping it shut and trying to whisper through his teeth at the same time. Did you understand what his mumblings were about? Yamada says and steals a glance at Izuku, then back to Mom. She shrugs, hands folded over themselves on top of the table. Looks like everyone's done eating. It's true that she doesn't look concerned, nothing more than that familiar bittersweetness in her eye. but her smile is tight at the corners. He shakes himself out of the lingering fog quite physically and scrounges through his mind for something that will break the tension between them. Can't ask about Yamada again. Don't have anything to ask Mom about. They talked about heroes already. Welcome back to the world. We're glad to have ya. Yamada calls, oblivious to the relief that shudders over Izuku's frame. A big grin takes over his face as he leans conspiratorially forward. How's your day been? I just realized I never asked about it. Any friends to talk about? Cool teachers, a flower you saw on the sidewalk? Oh, I left school early today. He blinks a few times and shifts in his seat, drawing up his legs to sit crisscross. We had to talk to my principal. And then I went home. He figured he would be questioned about the mumbling, but Yamada just skipped right over it. He has to reorient himself. That term was in the crossword. This morning to the abrupt change in topic of flower. Did he see a flower? Those are better to describe than his meeting with Omiro, and Hana. Mom nods, a somewhat pained look crossing her face. But she doesn't stop him from continuing, so he slowly and carefully does. He didn't see any flowers while glancing at his mother every few seconds to pick up cues from her. I didn't start a fight. He claims with a jolt, a frown on his face. I didn't, but I had to see Omiro-sensei anyway. This fight is that the Yamada trips over himself, even though he's not talking very fast, grin fading into something smaller and more controlled. The bloody nose, I mean. From the other day. A sharp sting curls up in Izuku's chest. He's not sure what it's from, so he pushes through the tightness to correct him. No, the fight the principal was talking about happened in English. I left school after those kids tore up my papers that day. Some of the older kids saw me leaving and well, yeah, bloody nose. All of the color sinks out of Mom's face. He stumbles to a halt, sticky and uncomfortable, as he realizes that the only damage the fight in English dealt was emotional, and that he forgot to tell her what happened after he left classes early. Before he can blink or suck in a breath, Mom's arms are wrapped around his head, her cheek laid flat against the top of his hair in a weird hug. He tentatively and blindly reaches up to pat her shoulder. You need to tell me these things, Izuku. She blubbers out, face full of green curls. I figured you just tripped or hit your head since you were crying so much, and I know how you get when you're upset, and I can help. I can help if you tell me things. His hair can't get very wet, and Yamada can't seem to fully process the situation to feel embarrassed over it before Mom's pulling back and sniffling loudly. After Aldra, we agreed that you wouldn't hide the bullying anymore, Izuku. This can't happen to you again, okay? It won't. She hugs him for real around the chest, next brief and bone-crushingly tight. It only lasts a moment before she starts towards her bedroom, determination splayed bright and hot across her face. Izuku doesn't have time to process the choking lump in his throat or the burn at the edges of his eyes, and she's already too far away to latch onto. Do your routine, please, and we're going to talk after I make a call, she says while steadily moving out the kitchen, already digging through her pockets for her phone. I'm sorry for the sudden absence, Yamada-kun. I have to take care of this. I'll take care of this. Yamada swivels his head from Mom's retreating form to all of their plates sitting on the table to the perfectly still Izuku. The kid in question has untucked his feet from underneath him and is swinging his legs back and forth in movements too stuttered to be completely calm, munching on an apple slice. It soothes the heat on his tongue pretty nicely. Yamada stares at the slice in confusion, but doesn't say anything. He probably has questions. When did she have the time to carve into an apple? Might be one. Where is she going? And why is another? He gawks. Yes, that is a better word for his expression, until Izuku finishes off the red-skinned slice. Mom's mad. It wouldn't do any good to stop her, or to convince her not to make that call. Izuku isn't looking forward to this talk they'll be having, but it'll be fine. Mom always wants to make sure he's fine. He starts to walk towards the staircase, then jars to a stop right outside of the kitchen boundaries, as if he was caught going somewhere he shouldn't be. Sorry, Yamada, I think she's calling her lawyer friends. He turns, catching Yamada's wide as saucer's eyes, and waves his hands in a senseless gesture. She'll be back. Do you want to join me? Watch me, he offers tentatively, awkwardly. I just clean up after dinner. That's the routine. We can talk. His skin is itchy, and he has a cup of juice upstairs he'd like to get to before it warms up. but it's rude maybe. To leave company by themselves. It's a little strange to have to worry about guests. Mom must have become comfortable around Yamada really fast to leave him and Izuku alone. She's usually strict about good manners when it comes to guests, and all likeliness today is probably a day where her thoughts are scattered everywhere. Those days get worse when she's worried like this. For right now, he decides Yamada can come with him upstairs. Then Mom won't feel too guilty and Izuku can do his routine, and no one has to be alone. Yamada doesn't ask many questions as they carry a conversation between them. He never asks many questions in casual talking, it's just not how he speaks. And he lets Izuku ramble on about heroes for the third time in an hour. He mostly goes through his after-dinner routine by himself like he usually does. But he includes Yamada by asking for help at some points. Their steady stream of soft back and forth doesn't end or really slow down at any point. Either pick up his room, straighten out his rug and bed sheets, change into pajamas. He can skip that one tonight, change out bandages and plasters. If needed, rub a warm washcloth over his arms and hands and brush his teeth. If Mom did it with him, she'd rub lotion on his cheeks and help him fit his sleep hat over his hair. It's soothing to just check off the boxes. He runs through the motions mechanically, automatically, only pausing when it comes to the last few steps. He can't end up finding a polite way to tell Yamada to leave his spot on the rim of the bathtub, so he doesn't say it at all. He simply asks whether Yamada wants to help him change his bandages, or if he wants to close his eyes. His relationship with his torn-up skin is obviously pretty neutral, as he doesn't care who sees it. But a strange flush of shame comes over him when the man silently stares back. Yamada's flustered and shocked. It's horrible. His stare is one of pity and nasty dripping sadness. Izuku's seen it far too much when people see his bandages or hear about his lack of a quirk. A moment passes. Yamada recovers himself. Izuku shoves down the heat curdling in his stomach. He asks a gentle question as he physically wipes the pity off his face, as if he could shatter Izuku with a couple stupid words. Though he's already edging towards the sink to join him there. Mama doesn't close her eyes. Izuku replies, nearly indignant for a reason he can't explain, about how this normally goes. She doesn't come in at all, not unless I need help. I'm big. Yamada's face softens considerably again for a reason, and in an emotion Izuku can't explain. While he nods and readies some all-might plasters, their voices don't die off, not quite. But they move a little less easily. A few plasters come off, some come on, and Izuku checks under a couple thin rolls of bandages. He can take one of them off entirely. That bit of fabric was wrapped loosely around his ribs, protecting the 2 or 3 bruised ones. His soured mood is lifted almost instantly at the sight of Yamada tossing them into the bin. There are barely any dark colors or swollen areas around his ribs, as Izuku happily explains, so he can take off the bandages now. How did you, bruise your ribs, kiddo? That must have hurt. A sudden laugh bubbles out of his throat, the bright sounds fading off into wheezing giggles. I climbed up on top of the huge swing set at school, and then I saw a cat, so I tried to chase it. I fell down real hard, tripped down the stairs a few weeks later, and it made everything bruised again. Their light conversation flows a smidge easier. After that, Izuku's laughter is infectious. It seems upon timid request, Yamada closes his eyes for the washing step. He doesn't need to do more than take his shirt off for a few minutes. But Yamada must like seeing the plasters instead of the skin underneath like Mom. So he shouldn't see this part. There are more bruises and such than fun plasters underneath Izuku's shirt. The man takes it upon himself to close his eyes, stand inside the shower tub facing away, and put his hands on his hips like a hero posing for reporters. It makes them both laugh. For as long as it takes for him to quickly scrub down his skin, he usually doesn't need to do more than his arms. But Mom wanted him to check on and wash down his ribs tonight. Either way, no more fuss is needed. When their peals of laughter die down and Yamada climbs out of the tub, Izuku's finished up and starts brushing his teeth. The two make their way downstairs. He can still hear Mom pacing around in her bedroom and talking into the phone. As they get down there, they end up cleaning instead of knocking on her door in fear of interrupting. He isn't quite tall enough to use the kitchen sink by himself. Yet so Yamada rinses the plates and passes them down for drying. Neither of them know where the fancy guest plates and silverware go. Izuku decides to stack their dried dishes on the counter beside him. Finished in minutes, Yamada starts up a lively discussion about how so many heroes have side jobs. such as the Wild Wild Pussycats Animal Food Line's Best Jeanists Pants Company, and whatever an adult clothing line is for midnight. It must be super stressful to have so many jobs. Mama just has one, and she's always tired. That's true. But they get plenty of money from working so much, and so does she. Money is important. A solemn nod from chubby cheeks. Yamada nods back. His smile is wavering, like he's trying not to burst into laughter. They get cut off by Mom, sheepishly entering the kitchen. Sorry for that, you two. Thank you for keeping our guest occupied, Izuku. You did a great job, she says, slinking over to said Izuku to press a kiss to his forehead. She gathers up their dried plates and slides them into a rarely touched cabinet far above her son's reach. And thank you, Yamada-kun, for assisting with dinner dishes. Please excuse my rudeness. Izuku tugs on her arm. When she's finished bowing, silently motioning towards his plastered-up arms and clean shirt, he beams at the murmured praise. He receives Yamada and Mom trade a knowing smile of their own mom, sending a more tender one down to Izuku as he clings onto her skirts. It was really no trouble at all. Yamada steps forward, grinning and looking sad again all at once. He wipes the gray glint off his face after glancing away from Izuku. Dinner was wonderful, and I have to thank you again for inviting me, he says. Unfortunately, though, I think it's getting late, Inko, so I better be skipping on home. Oh, of course, can't have you walking home in the dark. She's probably guilty enough about leaving him alone with her son. Can't have him in danger while walking back home. Hand in hand, mother and son lead him to the door. Mom offers more kind words and smiles, which he returns enthusiastically, and Izuku tries to ignore the twisting in his stomach. Finally, the door is cracked open. Yamada has his outside shoes on, and they're all having their last goodbyes. I'll see you later, right? Yamada glances down at Izuku. His flash of surprise seeps away slow and steady. To make room for understanding, he crouches down so old green eyes can meet young. He places a hand on top of damp curls. I'll see you as many times as you want me to, Yamada assures, a small but easy sort of smile spreading across his face. If you want me over again, or if your mom does, all y'all gotta do is ask. I am pretty soft for you, pipsqueak. His hand grows lighter instead of heavier on Izuku's head as he eases his way up, and he shares his blinding grin with Mom too. Until next time, Midoriya-san. Izuku, stay safe, yeah. You as well, Yamada-kun. Izuku is quick to copy her and calls out the same goodbye. The sour twisting in his stomach doesn't stop completely. It usually doesn't, not for long, but as his lips stretch up to his cheeks without him quite realizing, as he stares at the closed door with sparkling eyes, he can feel himself settle. There haven't been any mean teachers other than Hana-san, which was an absolute wonder for Izuku. The school didn't need to change at all. They had flaws in how teachers dealt with some kids, but it wasn't so bad that the district had to be reported or something. Unlike Aldera, nothing has to change. Other than that group of 6th graders being mysteriously taken out of Izuku's sight. The only time he ever sees them since that was those kids last year in the same building as him anyway was during a mixed years field trip. And none of them would meet his eye anyway, therefore his steady flow of injuries slows down. He thrives, if he dares to say it. He picks himself up and makes a few friends, even if they only talk within the elementary. He starts to tell his teachers when someone picks on him too. At the start, they didn't pay any attention until he told his mom, and she came in to talk to the principal. Everyone listened a little more after that. He doesn't lose himself in swathes of bandages or petty insults thrown across the playground. Maybe in some other universe he would have, though sometimes when he isn't looking, a hollowness will still creep up on him, work its way into his chest and curl up there, sending goosebumps down his arms and a cold prick in the tips of his fingers whenever a teacher ignores him when he has to stay inside for playtime because the other kids don't like him, when he's just walking home and gets sneers from the people that notice his red shoes. The feeling always passes eventually. It might be willful ignorance, pretending everything's okay when it's not. He's 8 and he's already tired, but he thinks he can handle that. The knowing that he'll always get those looks and get held back, so he doesn't make anyone else uncomfortable. It takes a while for him to think that, to not let his ribs crumple into his heart at every gripe and off look. In the meantime, his and Yamada's friendship soars. Obviously, he and Mom become better friends than him and Izuku, But either way, it means he's over often enough that he has his own pair of slippers and his own couch blanket. Their meetings are contained to the usual playground and the house for a few months, conversations, shared dinners, Sunday talks over tea. Both with and without Izuku, they all stick to the worn routine, to the same places and same turned over discussions until a game of two truths and a lie gets out of hand. After 6 or 7 rounds of Izuku coming out the winner, Yamada teasingly asks, "So what else do you know about me?" It isn't a bad conversation per se, maybe just an uncomfortable one. Yamada stares back at him in utter surprise, mug of tea slipping out of his grasp. Mom catches it without a blink and eases the glass onto a coaster. She doesn't look up from her book for more than a glance. She knows everything already. He thinks Izuku's picked up everything he uses to understand people from her, and he's always so excited to share what he's found out with someone else. "You must have told your son is in the same year as me. You've definitely said what street you live on." He defends, arms crossed over his chest. Mom pats his head appeasingly, not even looking down. "No, it's the one past the playground with those berry bushes everywhere. He and Yamada were making fun of the splatters of red seeds on his white shoes a few weeks ago." Okay, thinking back, maybe Yamada didn't specifically name his street. But those kinds of berries only grow in a couple of neighborhoods around here. He brings back pretty heavy grocery bags, so he must live close. But his eyes are blown wide, and he's gone pale. "Don't look at me like that," Izuku whispers. A slow realization is falling over him, and he doesn't appreciate what it thinks of him apparently. He was never directly told that Yamada has a child at all, much less anything else. He didn't even have a reason to think the kid was a boy. It's just that he thought only boys could like cats, and Yamada has cats, so his kid must like them. The two have to explain to him that just because his mama and aunt are allergic to cats doesn't mean every girl is. Regardless, after Yamada admits Izuku was some form of ride-on like every part, he agrees to let the Midoriyas meet the Yamada Aizawa family. That kind of sounds like they've been asking, and he was denying them, but Izuku just never said he knew Yamada had a family. His home life never really came up. Saying this, he means that Yamada puts the meeting thing completely upon himself, ignoring that Mama keeps repeating how if you're not comfortable blah blah. He seems equally sheepish and excited both at Izuku's patchwork skills, that's what Mom calls it, and at his failure to keep his very secret family a secret from an 8-year-old plus, completely excited, not sheepish at all, at the idea of having everyone important in his life being in the same room together. Both Midoriyas may burst into tears when he says that so casually. "Put your hands up, little listener. Stretch all the way up to the ceiling. I heard your mama come in, so I'm going to leave you to her now, but make sure to take big deep breaths. Good job, little dude, bye-bye." Izuku had gone through an asthma attack of some sort, his breath going short and his chest getting so tight. He thought he was going to suffocate. He'd accidentally called Yamada instead of his mom on his emergency phone, which only has 2 contacts anyway. And now that he can breathe and his mom is clinging to his back, knowing that he'll freak out if she hugs him around the front, he bursts into tears. Mom sees tears, immediately copies them, then sobs with him before he even says anything. It's kind of nice, actually makes it less gross. The kids at school just stare at him when he cries. And he always feels so small and dirty. Yamada he did the H hands thing. He can feel how Mom startles against him. She starts to say something, probably trying to soothe him, or remind him that he can't call people heroes just because they look alike. He doesn't care because he knows now, and he's so embarrassed he could die. He did the thing, and he can't ever come over when Present Mike is on the TV, and he's got a voice quirk, and he's blonde. Mom. Present Mike has seen me cry over a broken F figure of him. Mom. I have posters of him. Mom. When Yamada shows up the next day for dinner, Izuku immediately tears up and runs away. He can't be coaxed out from behind the dryer for hours. After he finally lets Mom scoop him up, she has to give him his Present Mike poster and gently encourage him to go find Yamada. He signs it with a glittery pen though, and Izuku perks up considerably. A long conversation later, he learns what a non-disclosure agreement is. He also finds he shouldn't try to pronounce disclosure unless he wants to cry. The afternoon bleeds through the curtains in waves, washing the room in soft yellow light. The warmth settles on Izuku's skin gently and thoroughly seeps in through his skin and settles somewhere low in his bones. He flips through his journal on the floor, legs kicked up behind him, and the carpet scratching his tummy. There's burnt photos, glitter, and confident scrawls of katakana and hiragana, and some kanji he picked up on reading everything pretty quick. But Mom still tells him to practice writing it all together as often as he can. A picture of Izuku and the back of a purple head of hair makes him pause a few pages in. The date written below, it marks the day Yamada's whole family came over for the first time. He peers into the photo after a second of smiling, though squinting at the background. The window right behind Yamada doesn't have as much sunlight filtering through it as the others. A person passing by maybe. They would have walked by too fast to clearly be caught on camera. With where the house is, plenty of people walk through the side alley to get back to the main road. That's weird, right? That's still kind of weird. Izuku blinks, so the blurry figure's clear in his mind. Yamada had strolled through the door, as if he did it every day. And he kind of did. He greeted them by smacking loud kisses on their cheeks, despite that his family's standing right there. It always made Izuku giggle. The other two that trickled in behind were a lot less enthusiastic. A man in dark clothes with his hands in his pockets, that must have been Aizawa. Then there was a boy also dressed in gray and black standing next to him. He had peered around Yamada's practically vibrating form, knuckles pressed loosely into Mom's flowery dress, with his heart in his throat, and struggling to keep his lips pressed together so his teeth didn't show. He wanted to impress them so bad, he could almost cup it between his palms. The feeling was warm like sunlight and heady in a way that stunk of desperation. The two children's eyes met at the same time, purple. Izuku had cried, almost launching himself off his mother's side. All the anxiety bubbling in his gut disappeared, so he could rush forward. Glow stick? Purple cried back. He stayed where he was, hand suddenly fisted in the other man's sleeve. But his mouth fell open in shock. They both pointed hastily at each other, neither realizing a camera had flashed, until they were shown this same photo later. Shinso, a great day, really, except Izuku had holed up in his room, right after they all finished eating. He wanted so much and so bad it put something hard and squirmy in his gut. When he tried to play with Shinso and talk with Aizawa, they would look at him. It scared him, so he went up to his room. He wanted to talk and laugh and make friends with them like he's friends with Yamada. But they looked at him like his teachers and the kids at school and the people on the street did. Like he wasn't worth their time, and damn him for being there when they didn't want him. He doesn't know what the look means even now, doesn't understand why anyone would stare or frown when he's smiling and being nice. He's still not sure what to make of Aizawa, since the man practically grimaces every time Izuku enters the room. He is mildly terrifying. It's fine. Shinso hasn't talked much after the first exclamation, either, instead glaring at anyone who comes too close. Izuku and Shinso are friends now, though after a few months of being around each other, the like is mutual. For the most part, he thinks he pulls himself out of that line of thought to flip through more pages. There are a lot of pictures of Shinso, Aizawa, and Yamada, whether that be all together or candid shots of them in pairs, or by themselves. There are a lot pictures of Mom and Izuku posing together also frequent the pages. This album is full of his favorite people, just like his journal is full of them. He's learned that people don't have to be heroes or extraordinary for him to be allowed to like them. Before he knows it, he's slowing down to take in his last few full pages. On one, a blurry snapshot of Yamada sprinting away from a ladybug greets his curious fingers. The dim light pulls a vaguely purple sheen over the details of the photo. Half of Mom's face is stamped on the edge of it too, laughter blurring her form. She just seems happy to be happy. She holds up two fingers in a V towards the camera, eyes crinkled at the corners, and a pleasant flush in her cheeks. The page turns after minutes of Izuku drinking in her smile. His fingers trace over it before moving on. The workers from the convenience store grin back at him on this one. It seems like they stole the camera with the teasing expressions, and the way it's held at an awkward high angle. They aren't his only friends anymore. But every time he remembers to stop by, they treat him like he's still there every day. The next shows Shinso curled up under a park bench at a time right before night, Aizawa and Yamada sitting cross-legged in front of him to coax him out. The purple hood pulled over Shinso's head was dimly glowing in the half-dark. Another photo taken in that not night, not daytime comes next. It shows a wide field with no end, full of fireflies and white flowers turned plum in the dusk. Mom and Izuku's shoes lay nestled in the grass. Not too far off hers are sturdy boots, dark brown with black laces that have black beads clinging off the ends. The child-sized pair next to them match, though they have neon green laces instead and double as many colored beads pages full of memory stickers, and enough glitter to drown, and there are more to be filled in blank ones that stare accusingly at him. Sometimes, but Izuku pauses at the very last photo in between blinks. It's of himself. Mom took this one, the edges tinged with black marks. Izuku recalls having to drive his palms into his eyes hard enough to scrub back any traitorous tears minutes before the photo. He can remember the ache, the white-hot stars that burst on the back of his eyelids. He dug his knuckles into the corner of his eyes, then into the hollows of his cheeks, pinching and pulling and trying desperately to stave off the heat in his face. After barely a minute, he had turned and walked back inside. He had plastered on a smile firmly, ignoring how puffy his face must have looked, and waved Mom down. He doesn't remember what the look on her face was, or the brief conversation she tried to start with him after. But he remembers being asked to sit next to his cake for a picture. It wasn't a fancy thing. A vanilla cake with bright yellow frosting to mimic All Might strawberries topping the rim, one thin candle stuck out of the middle. Izuku scours the picture, checking over for what must have been wrong with his cake, wrong with him. Just like he's done countless times before. He can't find anything but his own mouth stretched out in a smile with his teeth showing. Smile, baby. Happy 9th birthday. Mom had called, voice tight but cheerful. Izuku smiled back. He shoved the sickening feelings twisting up inside of him, screwed his eyes wide open for the camera, and beamed in a way he didn't feel. There wasn't anyone else coming to smile with him. It was already hours past when his classmates should have showed he and his mother each had a slice of cake. Then they cleaned up the hero-themed decorations around the living room. Mom ended up giving the rest of the cake to her co-workers at the hospital since he couldn't look at it without feeling sick. He smooths his fingers over his face in the photo and the drooping streamers in the background. He closes the journal. That was the last entry. It's fine to end it since he filled the journal for the most part. He shakes himself off quickly enough, tossing the abandoned photo album into a box in the back of his closet. The door slides shut with an abrupt sort of finality, like it'll never be opened again, like he should have spent more time with the year of his life he had just hidden away. Maybe he should have. Maybe he should have hesitated before the door shut, let himself have more than 15 minutes to flip through his journal. As it is, he didn't. He slammed the door. He closed the book so he wouldn't have to read it again. And that's really fine. He comes out of his room, eases a smile onto his face, and grabs his shoes so they can meet the Yamada Aizawas for ice cream. He's silently treating the outing as a late celebration of sorts, since his birthday was just a few days ago. He'd firmly told Mom not to remind them that he's 9 now when she brought it up. If she told his personal celebration wouldn't be silent and secret anymore, it would ruin the game. And then he'd get all sad and droopy over his ice cream. The last page didn't have anything but that slightly burnt picture, a date, and a line of scribbled text under it: 9th birthday party. Me. Mama took the photo, and we had cake. No one came. It was fun. Yamada and Shinso and the aggravatingly terrifying Aizawa meet them at a homey little ice cream shop. Nobody notices Izuku's red-rimmed eyes past the wall of his bangs. It's been a full 2 weeks since his birthday. The bitter crackling feelings that toyed in his chest have all but faded. But he doesn't really want to mess with that all right now. Right now, there are no charred shadows in the corners of his eyes or ice that threatens his bones. Right now, he has peace. He's a little bored, sure, unsettled in a way that sleeping well and having good food can't. Even fix. Hero toys lay scattered across his bedroom floor. Now he sets some picture books down, arranging them between figurines as well as a few crayons and pieces of blank paper. A small pile of broken and cracked figurines sit off to the side together for him to pick through later. He's been shoving pieces into kids' lockers. If they broke the toy in the first place, once he has everything set up as he wants it, he settles onto his stomach in the middle of his rug. Mom and Yamada hurried off a while ago to shop for groceries, so he's been alone for an hour or two. They're planning some special secretive dinner together, which he is looking forward to. It's starting to get boring though. Okay, he's not technically alone. Aizawa and Shinso have been placed in the living room by Yamada's goodwill. Just alone enough, so he lays there in his room, instead of where the other two are. His eyes roam through the selection. He's given himself fidgety and unsatisfied for reasons he cannot possibly understand right now. The silence around him sounds more like static than it usually does. Everything seems off to the left a bit. and he has no idea how to fix it. Hi, Shinso has his hand resting heavy on the doorknob. He hadn't managed to avoid the creaky step, so Izuku already has his gaze near the other's head. He only opened the door halfway though, and it looks like he's trying to hide behind it. Hiya Shinso, Izuku replies easily. He lets his eyes find Shinso's before flashing a smile. Do you want to sit with me? With an exhale that sounds more like a sigh of relief, Shinso slinks over and settles down on the edge of the rug. He's not tense exactly, but he looks as restless as Izuku feels. Izuku stays where he is, ignoring the urge to sidle up right next to him and squeeze into his space. It tugs at his stomach as fiercely as ever. He learned right away that his touchiness would not earn him any good favor, though, so he stays where he is even if he has to tuck his buzzing hands between his chest and the floor and figure out how to prop himself up. Their eyes furtively meet just once before they both look back down to the floor. A few seconds of silence pass by. He relearns that he cannot handle the not noise, so of course he slides a book about spiders to the other's knee. He tries to clamp down an excited stare and grin as he draws his fingers back. He's not sure how well that attempt works, so he also ducks his head down too. He has a book about the ocean laying there. His head kind of hurts, and he doesn't really feel like reading, but that's the closest thing he had to him, and he can keep his hands under him. Unless he's flipping a page, if he's reading an eternity or so later, clothes rustle out of his view like their owner is reaching down for something. The sound is subtle, only barely cutting through the silent static. Izuku hides his smile. The two read quietly, an arm length away from each other. They can both finish and pick up a new book before either of them speak. Izuku turns his pages faster than Shinso does, but Shinso likes to take more time poring over the pictures anyway. He also doesn't need to shift much other than lean more comfortably against the bedpost. But Izuku squirms and fidgets instead of laughing or mumbling to himself. They're different, they enjoy different things in different ways. But the static is gone to make room for the quiet they've created, and Izuku can recognize why he and Shinso have been able to stay half friends. Then Shinso sets down his fiction book about a family of dogs. He doesn't mark his spot, Izuku. He raises his head in acknowledgement. A question he doesn't want to breach the quietness yet. Can I? Shinso falters, pulling his laid-out legs closer to him. It's almost defensive. Why didn't you, tell me about your birthday? A sharp, disgruntled noise escapes Izuku as he scrambles to sit up properly. Whatever word it was supposed to be, neither of them know what it was or what it turned out to be. He's facing Shinso by then, legs tucked underneath himself, and tips too far forward to be comfortable. Your mom and my dad were talking yesterday. She was complaining about an ash stain, how a picture got caught on the birthday candle. When it printed out, heat sizzles into Izuku's cheeks, burning a crude hole through the quiet he turned into a comfort. Well, I didn't want to tell you. He snips back defensively, definitely not about to cry. I didn't think you'd want to come, that's all. But you invited us. Dad got all sorry and was freaking out about it. He started apologizing for forgetting your party, Shinso insists. This is a test that was a test. Izuku failed it. He has to scrounge up every ounce of resolve he owns to push back tears. A sharp breath puffs out of his nose. I invited Yamada 'cause my mama asked me to. I didn't think he'd want to come and he didn't. Shinso ignores that Izuku's rocking back since he doesn't know the things Yamada and mom does. And he doesn't know not to touch Izuku right now. He sways forward to chase him, and Izuku's so close to scratching at his throat until there's blood inside and outside, and all he'd be able to taste is salt and copper. No, he just forgot he's been busy. And he forgot to tell me about the party. I would have reminded him if I knew. Izuku. His lip curls as he speaks, frustration and confusion swirling onto his face in equal measure. But he still follows when Izuku twists away again. Don't fib, it's fine. I'm not lying. I don't have. Izuku tilts a little too haphazardly, tilts a little too far to keep a center of balance, so he goes spilling over the floor. He jumps up faster than Shinso can blink and scrambles back 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. It's fine. He forces off a numb tongue. Maybe he's trying to convince himself first and Shinso second. It doesn't matter. It's fine, I'm fine, it was just a birthday. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Shinso pulls himself to stand 2, just slower than he did, more carefully. His expression smooths out in another careful way. The irritation lines in his face relaxing. Izuku watches. It warily, his fingers clumsily dig into his eyes and cheeks to clear the tears. Shinso might still be miffed about this whole thing despite his look. If he is, he's trying not to be Izuku. It's fine, just leave it please. Fine, okay. I'll drop it. He pauses and his silence ripples in the air. Izuku can see him test the words on his tongue. I didn't mean to make you upset, I'm sorry. His voice softens almost into a murmur, like the hurried admittance makes him embarrassed. Head ducked down, foot scuffing harshly against the rug. 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3. Do you? The same murmur rises into a roughed up, if stubbornly firm question. You wanna? Go downstairs. We can bring the books, but I can make my ba play with us too, if you wanted. Izuku sniffles and wipes his hand across his nose. He doesn't trust himself to answer around the tough lump in his throat, yet doesn't want to unwrap his arms from around himself. Shinso must take it as irritation. He hunches his shoulders down, foot still grinding down, and glances up to search Izuku's face with tightened lips. I know you like playing heroes, thanks for the eye. I like the reading, so we can play heroes now. I won't talk about your birthday again. The lump loosens slightly. He can't choke any words past it, not if he wants to suffocate his frustration before tears can fall at the same time, so he shuffles forward. Shinso hunches further into himself, like he expects Izuku to start yelling at him. He keeps watching through his hair, though Izuku drops into a crouch and gathers some figures into his hands, popping back up to show off his prize. He can feel a pointy tooth poking over his lips as he puts on a little smile. You think Aizawa would let us put him in the laundry room? Aizawa ends up locked in the laundry room. Izuku didn't even know there was a latch on the inside. The laundry room is more of a closet, the dryer and washer nestled inside, so he knows Aizawa is sitting on top of the machines and probably playing on his phone. Izuku and Shinso continue to play heroes after that, after whining for villain Aizawa to come out and face justice, laughing until they're both gasping for air, where Shinso lets him be the hero. Neither of them really like being the villain. But Aizawa isn't here to take the role anymore. His patience had run out around the 30-minute mark of playing with them. Another 20 minutes pass like this. At that point, the two boys are recuperating on the couch. Shinso lets Izuku flop over his legs, grumbling every couple minutes about a knobby spine digging into his shins, though he and Izuku still melt into each other. How are your bones sharp? I'm sorry, it's not my fault. That's ridiculous. And they're your bones, so it's your fault. I don't complain about your elbows, Shinso, you're sharper than I am. Shut up, Greenie, Shinso says it as he gathers up some of Izuku's blanket, which includes part of Izuku, and squirms closer to it. Be nice. Izuku says it as he shifts to smash his cheek into Shinso's shoulder, willingly sharing his favorite blanket. See. They get along. Then the front door bursts open. Shinso shoves his face further into the couch cushion, not looking up or shifting any otherwise. At the exact same time, half a second after the adults suspiciously quiet down, both Izuku and Shinso take a glance. Yamada's absolutely glowing face stares down at them. Then a camera flashes. Glad to see y'all are getting along. Yamada cheers, fanning his hands out excitably. Izuku can't help but copy the motion even though he's tired. Where's Baba Toshi? He's supposed to be watching you. Mom lowers her disposable camera with a matching smile from beside him. Neither of the boys have quite recovered from being blinded. While Shinso grimaces and tucks his face into Izuku's shirt, Izuku blindly gestures toward the laundry room. They all go silent, and then ping, an ancient version of the Wii theme song starts to trill, muted by the door. Yamada throws his hands up in exasperation and goes toward the kitchen to put away his bags. He's not confused or surprised at all, doesn't bother asking any second questions. How often does Aizawa do this? I'm divorcing you, you mangy little creature. This is the last thing our failing marriage could take. What about our child? Aizawa asks, voice muffled by the door. I have a better lawyer for the custody arrangements, and you know it. Damn it. Everyone in the living room can clearly hear the way the laundry room lock unclicks. Not a second after then, how Yamada starts choking with laughter. Izuku thinks he and Aizawa start kissing in the kitchen. Mom hurries to turn on cartoons and gather their attention. So all because of that one afternoon, Izuku and Shinso start playing more, touching more, and being more comfortable around each other than they had been. Well, Izuku is very touchy. Shinso just tolerates it more often. They didn't really have friends other than each other after all. The adults seem to be utterly fascinated by the sudden developments so much, so that Mom and Yamada run out of camera film in a few weeks. They could just use their phones, sure. But the little disposable camera is cheaper than printing out a bunch of stuff. Aizawa just has cartoonishly wide eyes whenever he sees Izuku and Shinso curled up on the floor or couch together. Shinso keeps his promise, though he doesn't mention Izuku's birthday again. He even goes out of his way to stop the few attempts Yamada makes in the days following to talk about it. This warm feeling settles in Izuku's ears and the tips of his fingers whenever he sees it. The obvious solution to all the loose photos is an album book. Izuku doesn't update his journal, but he had to get the idea from somewhere, right? His mom's always kept track of important things through binders and albums and all those kinds of things. He's sure she made one of her and his dad. But if she still has it, it's hidden somewhere he can't get to. She has too many bundles of printed photos to count, as well as picture frames settled just about everywhere around their house. The most embarrassing picture, the one Shinso allegedly tried to steal and burn, is one Izuku has to cajole his mother into showing him in the middle of August, a few weeks after their friendship breakthrough. Their respective parents had put them in jail, which took place in Izuku's room, where he and Shinso laid on Izuku's bed and tangled themselves up in each other's limbs so badly that it looked like they were holding each other. They were being grumpy apparently, and were forced to sit in there without any toys, and with nursery music playing through the door, until they took a nap. Izuku glances at how some of Shinso's hair found its way into his mouth in the picture, glances at the thin arm curled over Izuku's stomach holding him close to its owner in the picture. He also tries to burn it. Mom has to hide her baby blue, My Boy's album for a while. A harsh, chilled wind blows through the leaves, making Izuku sway on his perch. He coughs back a yelp and grabs a branch to steady himself, feet bracing against the tree trunk. The damage had already been done. Izuku, that's not fair, you're in a tree. He peers at Yamada, who has claimed the thicker branch beside Izuku's, and who also helped him get up here. Then he glances down through the foliage, where Shinso is running to their little patch of trees and yelling. Well, Shinso doesn't really yell, but he's grumbling loud enough for the sound to reach Izuku's ears. There are only 3 or 4 trees clustered around each other in this part of the park, so he won't need much time to spot them in the leaves. Izuku shrieks back wordlessly to mock him. Shinso's scowl just makes laughter splutter up from deep in his chest from the cold, driven tears on his cheeks, the warmth of his breath puffing back onto his lips. They both wave when Shinso comes to a stop right below. He's defiantly glaring up, hair pushed back by the wind, and his lips pressed in a line. You're tall, just get up here, Izuku taunts with a grin, leaning against the tree trunk to avoid another cold gust. If I can do it, you can too. He doesn't bother responding other than the bright blush on his cheeks. He's too scared to try to climb up. Is that his dad up there too? Yamada waves again. You didn't even climb up by yourself, Izuku. Shinso's voice can get loud, Izuku learns. It nearly reaches a howl. It makes the two double over in laughter. He rushes off, a promise of revenge left behind, so Yamada and Izuku climb up a few more branches. They're not very worried. In fact, Izuku is offering out pocketed candy at the moment. But better safe than sorry, right? Being a man without a jacket, Yamada complains about goosebumps. While rubbing his arms, frowning, Izuku insists on him taking his All Might sweatshirt. He tied it around his waist before the whole tag game started so it'd be easy to pass off. Yamada tries to explain that it wouldn't fit him or something, even though he's cold. And when Izuku's cold, it fits him just fine. Eventually, he manages to make Yamada accept it. It looks like a little cape where it's pinned around his shoulders. A flicker of black catches Izuku's eye a little way off. His giggles fade as he tilts his head just far enough to see it through the leaves. Picking on children now, Hisashi. The two look down to find Aizawa's casually terrifying stare. Shinso stands next to him, a wicked grin cut across his face. Yamada barks out a nervous laugh in response. He's already reaching up for higher branches. I picked on one, help the other. It cancels out, right? Yeah. Shota, don't come up here, Shota, please. Aizawa scales the tree like a spider looking for its next meal. Yamada rapidly ascends the tree, abandoning Izuku. Without a second glance, he shrieks for mercy all of the way, while Izuku starts to climb down the height. They were already had his stomach swimming. He knows he can't follow any further. He gets an arm length away from Aizawa, who's clearly surprised at Izuku's willing defeat. Before bracing his feet against a thick branch, Aizawa reaches for him. And then he jumps off 3 meters above the ground. 3 matching screams ring in his ears. Yamada's, who finally paused at the great shake the tree suffered. Shinso's, who is currently watching Izuku plummet to his death, and Izuku's, who is currently plummeting to his death. He didn't think this through. He's gonna die. He's dying. He reaches out, blindly catching nothing but snapped twigs and leaves to whip over his hands until his palms slam down on a sturdy branch. The shock echoes through his wrists, all the way up his arms, forcing a shriek out of his throat. He desperately scrabbles for a purchase. As his grip slips again, his scabbed over knees are thrown into the trunk, as his bottom half meets his top half. And then he's screaming himself hoarse. It hurts like his bones are echoing over each other. And there are needles shoved in the gaps between his bones, and it doesn't ease or slow for what feels like centuries. The screams continue except for his own. It hasn't been more than 1/3 of a second since he stopped, and none of them have realized he isn't still falling. He doesn't quite know that he isn't still falling, but all of the air was just been knocked out of him, so his voice abruptly cuts off. He is now 1 meter and some above the ground, and can almost kick Shinso from where he's angled. He drops down the rest of the way, hasty grip failing him, and lands in a pile at Hitoshi's feet. He almost takes the other boy down with him. Then he picks himself up, ignoring how every scab on his legs have open knees freshly raw and bloody, and sprints to the playground equipment. I win. He cackles, his teary voice carrying across the entire park. His ribs kind of hurt, but he brushes it off in favor of laughing like he's dying. No one tells Mom what happened when Aizawa tries. Yamada slaps a hand over his husband's mouth. He looks petrified. Shinso is still in shock at that point. Izuku is not allowed to climb trees around them anymore. Izuku wraps Shinso in a quick hug, Mom's hand light on his shoulder, and calls out a gleeful goodbye. Energy at what's to come crackles through him, a good 2/3 of it swirling around uncomfortably in his stomach. Worry is something he's familiar with, but the almost dizzying hope is not familiar, nor a particular comfort. He hears Mom apologize to the other adults, while his nose is buried in Shinso's collar. This apology is her 5th or 6th, all about how she's sorry they can't stay longer, especially since the family was finally comfortable with the Midoriyas visiting their house, etc., etc. That's all true. He is sorry he couldn't stay more than an hour or so. Their house is really cool. But he also wants to meet Aunt Tsuki at her house as soon as possible. Izuku draws away, maybe faster than he usually would have, flashing a grin full of teeth to Shinso as a parting gift. Already a few steps away, he catches the other boy's slightly hurt expression and has to ignore the twinge of guilt it brings. He echoes his own polite apologies, grabbing onto 2 of Mom's fingers on their way out. His smile only widens on their walk to the train station. Mom gave him the choice a few days ago if Katsuki will be allowed to see him, or if he'll have to leave while they're visiting. Katsuki has been going to something called behavioral counseling and quirk therapy. At least that's what Aunt Tsuki had said over the phone. Izuku could decide whether he wants to talk to him, even if he's supposed to be nicer now. No one would blame him, and well, the handprint doesn't ache anymore. He doesn't put his hand over when he's anxious anymore. Still, Katsuki isn't anywhere to be found. Izuku furtively vocab word checks over his shoulder and around corners, trying to hide it, shortly failing, searching. His shoulder itches. He's over at a friend's house for the night, Auntie tells him, brash and completely certain no matter what, and just like she always used to be. The brat knows you're comin' over, but he didn't kick up a fuss. She adds after a moment. Her hand floats above his head, as if her jerk instinct was to ruffle his hair, but it retracts back to her side a moment later. She always did that, or tapped him on the jaw when he was all fearful and shaky, didn't she? It feels like a lifetime since the last time he saw her. He's not scared of Katsuki or any of the Bakugos. He's never been scared of them. But he doesn't think he can face all of it at once today. He can barely settle into his own skin while in this house as it is, and he knows it would have been so much worse if Katsuki was here. so he's glad they catch up over tea and sweet little snack foods. Uncle Masaru emerges from his office. At some point, too, Katsuki can't be here this first time back. Maybe not the second or third time. Either Izuku's not quite ready for that, but soon he thinks he can give him another chance soon as they're back from visiting, just slipping their shoes off and talking about bedtime. Yamada calls. Izuku doesn't hear the conversation, but by what he can pick out, Yamada is pretty sheepish. Mom keeps laughing though, so he didn't blow something up or is in jail or anything. They had to pick Tsuki up from jail once Mom wasn't laughing. Izuku got to stay up to midnight that day. They end up going back to their house. Mom tells Izuku that they're staying for dinner too, so he doesn't grab any snacks before they leave as much as he wants to. Would Shinso like the green chocolate Mom picked up from the store? It's matcha probably, so he might want to try it next time. Maybe it's a short walk, only about 20 or 30 minutes down the road with shops, then past the playground and into a neighborhood. Izuku and Mom swing their hands together the whole way. Shinso bombards them at the door, only offering a quick greeting before dragging Izuku off. Laughter follows the two as they go skidding down the hardwood hallway. Yamada apologizes for Shinso's eagerness, giggling and laughing like he's not as old as he is. And then Izuku is put on Shinso's bed before he can blink. Cards. Shinso asks seriously. He sits across from the other on top of the covers, making sure they're facing each other, and opens a box of Pictionary cards of different animals. Izuku nods excitedly, but then presses his brows together seriously. His lips wobble. Cards. Izuku doesn't mention his trip to Shinso. He thinks he needs to figure this one out by himself. For now, every time Izuku and Mom visit Tsuki's house, Mom has put a possibly temporary and strict ban against the Bakugos visiting their new house. Instead, he has to check over everything right now. Safety means no sparks in dark hallways, no sight Katsuki, and having auntie and uncle in front of him at all possible times. He's not scared though, only wary after the third visit. He only needs 10 minutes to check. After the fourth, he doesn't startle very badly when Auntie raises her voice to pin in a point, a voice that sounds a little too close to Katsuki's. Sometimes after the sixth, he only takes a cursory glance around the sitting room and up the stairs before taking his usual seat. He leans into Tsuki's touches. Instead of stiffening in surprise, starts to joke. Instead of freeze up, tries to grin as broadly as he used to without having to think about it. After the eighth visit, nearly 3 months after the first, Izuku meekly suggests that Katsuki should come to the ninth. He's a shadow in the doorway between the kitchen and sitting room for the first hour, but he slowly inches his way behind the armchair as the visit goes on. That's as far as he goes, mostly because Izuku gets too jittery and asks to leave early, around 2 hours in and 2 hours before they would normally go back home. Their first few trips were short, but at this point visits to the Bakugos' house are all-day things. Mom and Auntie stand up immediately, Uncle shortly following after patting Katsuki's head to herd him out. Mom murmurs assurances and, "I'm so proud of you. This was a huge step. Thank you for telling me you were uncomfortables the entire way." Still next to the armchair, Katsuki's face twists up in an unfamiliar expression. Then Izuku is swept out of his sight. He will learn over the next few visits where Katsuki stays a silent shadow, and nothing more, that it is guilt. That specific set of lines around his mouth, the half-squinted and hardened eyes, is unfamiliar because he had never felt guilt over Izuku before. And now he's concerned, guilty, quietly disappointed when their eyes meet, and Izuku flinches a little. Katsuki isn't all anger and superiority these days. He's still irritated when so many visits pass, and he still gets told to leave, or Izuku does. He'll make a little growling noise, but he won't fight. Just let it happen. Walk out without blasting something. Let the rest of them walk out without coming any closer. Like the first day, Izuku might try to explain that change to someone, to his mom, to Shinso, to Auntie and Uncle, but it never quite clicks for them. They try to appease him, sure, but their expressions are always so quietly confused and placating. They don't understand exactly the difference between the kid that shoves his hands in his pockets now and the one that curled them into claws. He didn't mean to be cruel. Izuku thinks it doesn't mean he was kind, and that's fine. Even if they don't know why he knows, Katsuki knows. That's enough. 3.5 months after the original visit to the Bakugos' house, Izuku finally tells Hitoshi he's Hitoshi now, not Shinso. About them, he and Hitoshi are sitting on the latter's bed fiddling with the kid's tablet they were given. When he broaches the topic, "Hey Hitoshi." "Yeah, Izuku?" Izuku twists the blankets under his hands as they start to itch, thankfully remembering not to scratch up his arms. Hitoshi doesn't like it when he does that. You know how I'm busy most Saturdays? He asks, dropping his eyes down to his lap. MHM. Baba says your mom probably works on Saturdays. Well, we actually go visit my Aunt Mitz, suck kkh auntie, my auntie. Sorry. Izuku blinks a few times, beating down frustration enough times to ignore how much easier it would be to scratch the crawling away from his skin. Instead of twisting up the sheets, I had a friend, he explains haltingly. Kaken auntie's son. I couldn't pronounce his name right. He goes on to explain his and Katsuki's fragile and a volatile friendship. Through the years, he censors a lot of it. But he does remember Mom's words. She keeps insisting that he can't pretend that Katsuki didn't do anything, even if it hurts more like that, so he lets a few things slip. He tells Hitoshi about the bruises and burns, and how all of the teachers loved Katsuki and hated Izuku, and that he's still trying to accept all of it. How he was bullied for being quirkless, and not understanding why poking and teasing was fun, and 'cause they didn't know what to do with him when he couldn't ever follow the unspoken rules of school. At some point, Hitoshi has to calm him down because he started crying without realizing it. They both pad to the kitchen for water and snacks, and Hitoshi says he doesn't mind that Izuku got snot all over his favorite cat shirt. The conversation is slow and stuttered, and Izuku doesn't show him the handprint on his shoulder yet. But it goes well, it goes well. The scathing anger that lit up Hitoshi's eyes more than once during their talk might not be the best sign. Izuku can't help but feel relieved by it, though in some deep and dark part of himself, he won't talk about. Adults usually react in pity and worry over something that happened a long time ago. They act like they can fix everything, even though they weren't even there when it happened, and Hitoshi, he doesn't do that. He just gets angry on Izuku's behalf. It feels kind of nice light. He didn't think he could carry any more of that pity on his back. Hitoshi asks if he can share their conversation with his dads, which Izuku gives him permission to if he's a little startled at being asked if Yamada coddles him a little more in the following days, or if Aizawa slips him an extra chocolate after lunch. He wouldn't mention it. They don't act like he's fragile, so it's okay. They're warm and nice. And he thinks he doesn't need to worry about them leaving anymore. The sky is screaming down on him. He has his arms spread out as far as they can go, water slicing down on his skin and carving between the webs of his fingers, collecting at fingernails and the tips of his hair. The noise surrounds him. But he's screaming too, and he can't stop. There are shadows decorating the streets. Not the normal kind where the moon's just not reaching every part of the pavement. No, every time the sky flashes, bright red and yellow irises emerge from places nothing was before. They're always staring right at him, at the water sluicing off his hair and his chewed fingernails, at his open screaming mouth. They yell, "Do you see? Do you see? Do you see? You're not real," he always says back, hoping thunder flashes. "You're not real," they echo. God, he wants to think it's not real. He'll still pull the curtains closed when he wakes up. It takes another few trips. But Izuku tentatively asks Katsuki to sit next to him on the floor. They don't talk. The adults barely hold a conversation. At a whisper between themselves, he colors in a little book Hitoshi got him, while Katsuki fiddles with some figurines. When he's finished coloring, he pushes the page closer to Katsuki's legs and jumps up to leave. It's a simple little thing: a field of grass, a few trees, and a smiling sun sitting in the corner. It's hung up on the fridge by an all-might magnet. Next time he comes over, Mom ends up easing her restrictions on when he can be with Yamada, Aizawa, and Hitoshi by himself. That's more out of feeling bad because she's been working so late recently, though her words not Izuku's. She can't take him to the park nearly as much as she used to, and understands that he gets too antsy to stay inside every day. That is, nowadays he usually drops by his house to change into casual clothes before going to the park to meet up with Hitoshi. As long as he remembers to lock up behind him and get home before it's dark out, it's all right. Sometimes he's told beforehand that they won't be there, and he goes anyway to sit and stare out into nothing instead of being home by himself. He used to do that every day before he met Yamada. It makes him feel gray and foggy, though he doesn't like that feeling anymore. He's caught a shadow watching him from behind, building across the way. Only a few times the gray always sharpens around him. That's the best way he can describe it. He thinks he's gray and restless. And then it's the kind of fear that makes his heart beat in his throat. His eyes are always faster, When he's like that, his limbs jerk to life quicker. But the fog always lasts longer when he catches blurs of black, where there shouldn't be any. Izuku, watch out. A tennis ball knocks against his temple, sending a firm thud echoing through his skull. He keels right over with a yelp. Yesterday was a gray day. It seems like he hasn't quite recovered from it. The feeling of being watched, the feeling that drew him into his own head. A second ago goes away as quickly as it had come. Yeah, after Mom let him out more by himself, he's been at the park. A lot more. There's been a lot of mild injuries, more arguments, and days ending in dizzying laughter, and a seat at Yamada's dinner table. He's made sure to thank her a lot for letting him do all of it, even though she wasn't super comfy with the idea. He trusts Yamada and his family, and he doesn't think they'd ever hurt him on purpose. After he decides he doesn't have a concussion and Yamada confirms it, they all sit down by the seesaw to have snacks and drink some water. Hey Izuku? You with us? The man says, waving a hand in front of Izuku's eyes. He blinks in return. That's as good of an acknowledgement as anybody's going to get today. You're back all right. A laugh spills out from Yamada's lips. You feelin' okay? Hitoshi has a nasty underarm pitch. He nods absently, ignoring Hitoshi's sharp huff beside him. A cracked light bulb flickers on in his mind. Oh right. I think Mama's workin' graveyard shift again. She forgot to tell me. But she's napping right now, and she does that on graveyard shift days. Can I stay over with you? It's all right if not. His eyes flicker to his backpack before he can stop it. Yamada catches the brief look. Even if Hitoshi is too busy asking what a graveyard shift is to notice the flicker in attention. It's not super uncommon for him to bring his school bag along, but today it has clothes and food inside, instead of binders and homework. He's not sure if Yamada picks up on that, or not. He's scared to ask. Of course you can stay. Toshi graveyard is a long overnight shift, Yamada explains to them respectively. There's some strain in his voice that wasn't there before. It's from around 11 at night to 8 or 9 in the morning. Nurses like Inko-san sometimes work even longer than that. He turns to Izuku then, who has casually pulled an applesauce pouch out of his pocket, and his smile forms a little too much like glass. You said she's doing the graveyard shift again. Where do you usually go when she has one? He hums around his mouthful before relenting to Hitoshi's poking. The pouches are both cinnamon flavored. He has to swallow, but the eyes aren't prickling on the back of his neck. It's helping him recall the answer faster. Oh, I remember now. He replies proudly after a moment. I'll help her lock up the doors and windows, and then I'll go to my aunt's house to stay the night. She drops me off at school the next day since she lives too far away for me to walk. The concern hidden in Yamada's eyes lifts a little. He breathes a sigh of relief into his applesauce. He completely forgot that he isn't supposed to be at home by himself for that long. Geez, he still wants to say the truth. He remembered it right. And Yamada always smiles in the way that makes Izuku grin back. When he remembers right, it makes him all uncomfortable to get that smile. When he's fibbing about it, he bites his tongue. She doesn't take them often. He mumbles mostly to himself. This only happened a couple times. He can take care of himself for a couple nights. He just wants to stay over at Yamada's house, because he doesn't have any leftovers to warm up tonight. That's all. He can take care of himself, and the house he can. They take him to their house, soon after realizing that he isn't in the mood to play anymore. And they have American-style spaghetti. Hitoshi and Izuku curl up on the couch together to watch a movie. After they eat, Yamada does paperwork at the table until Aizawa comes home. Izuku's pretty sure that Aizawa has a second job other than being a teacher. Yamada is present mic obviously, and he's pretty sure Aizawa is someone in the hero biz too. He's super smart, so he could be some kind of informant or double agent, or even some kind of hero that just patrols at night instead of the day. There's always at least one of them at home after school. Though Hitoshi doesn't ever spend nights by himself, Izuku's been sleeping in his mom's empty bed. Izuku isn't. He's not sure about Katsuki. Yet he's always adored the boy and adored auntie and uncle and adored all of their quirks. Katsuki's especially. But he loves all of them. He just doesn't know whether it would be good for him to rekindle those feelings for Katsuki particularly. They flickered and died the moment he used his quirk to hurt. Power doesn't always mean greatness. Izuku's learned it doesn't automatically mean good. It means destruction, means the possibility of it. And that's no heroic thing. Unless they can control it, Yamada can turn people's bones into jelly. And he has one of the lowest casualty ratings of any top 100 hero. His blind adoration fizzled out the instant he saw Katsuki light explosions off right next to a girl's ears. He may not have realized it not until after he stepped in and received a handprint for the trouble later. But it did. He doesn't have to decide now. He can make sure Katsuki is really changing first. That's okay. I wanted the purple one. You have the purple one even though I wanted it first. This is blue. Who do you think you're? I think you're going blind. Katsuki Izuku stares at the two in bafflement, his own crayons pressed against his chest. His head throbs. With every shout that's let out too close to him, he was allowed to invite Hitoshi along to the Saturday visit, since Mom would need to help Auntie with some errands. This is the third time that's happened, and those two still squabble all of the time. No one really wanted Izuku to be alone with Katsuki in case something happens, and he freaks out as a super very extra precaution, and hopefully a temporary one at that. So in comes Hitoshi. Uncle Masaru is watching over them, of course, but he gets migraines and isn't as reliable as Mom is for breaking up fights, or as Hitoshi is for starting them apparently. I'll snap all of your crap in half, dweeb. Don't test me. Katsuki yells, his grip on his own crayon almost tight enough to break it. I will take everyone's crayons. Izuku uncrosses his legs, as if to physically steal their piles of freaking wax colors. Uncle Masaru has a headache, and I have a headache, and we shouldn't be yelling about crayons. There are tears bubbled up in his eyes, and he's sniffling and harshly rubbing at his face to scrub them away. But he doesn't like yelling. He doesn't like being so frustrated. And they're yelling at each other too, and his head hurts. They both turn to him at the same time, gazes hot with intent. While shuffling their piles closer to themselves, Hitoshi manages to speak first and throws out an accusing finger at Katsuki. Look at it, it's purple. He's much quieter than Katsuki, a little more wary of the flood coming out of Izuku's eyes. Katsuki has no such concern. He genuinely hisses and quickly moves to cut Hitoshi off. Tell this troll that it's blue and that I can see the purple crayon he's hoarding. Uncle Masaru is in the bathroom taking pills for his head and cannot even attempt to stop a fight. If this turns into one, Izuku kind of wants to hiss too. Or cry some more. Crying is a good pastime. He huffs out a wet breath and snatches both crayons out of their hands. Katsuki had his entire palm covering his, and Hitoshi was waving the purple one around to punctuate his words, so Izuku couldn't see either of them clearly. He takes a look at both, completely ignoring the two matching cries of protest at being relieved of their weapons, to find a purple and yellow crayon. Katsuki's wax stick is purple and Hitoshi's wax stick is yellow. He all but flings his head up to meet Katsuki's eye. He slowly raises the crayons so they're visible in his palm, then offers them out. Hitoshi falls silent, if petulantly, to watch. Which one is purple? Izuku asks slowly, still sniffling. He's just as stunned as Hitoshi was before they riled each other up. Katsuki puffs a sharp breath, the angry flush in his cheeks growing, and snatches the yellow crayon out of Izuku's hold. This one, obviously. Are you and the stupid troll playing a stupid joke or something? Kaken. Izuku trails off, his fingers tightening around the purple crayon still in his hand. That's yellow, this one is purple. They gape at each other, and the ruddy flush in his face deepens. Nobody moves for long, tense seconds. Nobody dares breathe. Then the bathroom door opens. It seems to pull them out of their shock. The first one to speak is Katsuki. Fucking what? He mumbles, eyes wide, as they glance back and forth from the crayons. Uncle Masaru enters the room just in time to hear a somewhat confused cry of victory and a tinny burst of laughter. When he thinks about it, he realizes that Hitoshi gets mad at Katsuki for the simplest stuff. He'll pout and get upset if they play in the sandbox without him, even though he hates the sandbox. But he won't get upset if it's Izuku and a random kid. Only if it's Katsuki he's quiet then too. But if Katsuki's playing with them, he'll get even louder than if it was just him and Izuku that day. Izuku is full of neon grins, prepackaged babbles, and happy rants, and abrupt mood swings at a mere inkling of interest or unhappiness. On the other hand, Hitoshi prefers to keep his thoughts to himself. And he doesn't make nearly as many temporary friends. He seems content just watching from the side or close to Izuku's shoulder, just playing with him without anyone else, and especially being by himself when Izuku gets too loud, and excited when Katsuki starts going to the park with them more and Izuku gets wholly wrapped up in having a second regular friend. He isn't as surprised as he should have been when Hitoshi gets a little possessive. He doesn't take breaks from loud playing as often, doesn't go off to sulk and huff when Izuku accidentally screams in his ear, just lets out his irritation in the form of fighting. For example, at this moment in time that Izuku had casually blanked out of, he's watching them argue over who gets to rescue him. Their game needs a hero, a villain, and someone to be saved. He sits with the swing set pole pressed into his back, playing with mulch between his fingers, not startling much when Hitoshi grabs him by the sleeve. Then Katsuki grabs him by the other sleeve, and they continue fighting while trying to tear him in half. Not a great way to start out a rescue mission, though he'll allow it if he gets to be carried all around the playground again. Katsuki jostles around a lot and Hitoshi can't run with anybody on his back for very long. But being carried is his favorite thing ever, no matter who's doing it, or how. It's almost like flying. He sinks back into awareness, an amused thing spread across his cheeks, and lets them argue it out. Boys. Aunt Suki yelps, jogging over to them. Some 15 minutes later, both of their voices had gone raspy from shouting their hearts out. By then, Izuku's head is dizzy and ready to float off his neck from how much he'd been jerked around. His grin is still there, though laughter starting to spark off his tongue as Tsuki chews the others out. Look, Katsuki, you've gone and torn Izuku's sleeve again. Inko's going to murder me if she has to patch up another shirt, you little brat. And Hitoshi, you know what? Tsuki pries two grubby hands off Izuku's sleeves, roughly patting his clothes down for him, then hoists him up to her hip. If you can't be nice, you can't have him, you fucking brats. Both of them immediately roar up a protest. Izuku's hiccuped giggles turn into laughter that makes the tip of his tongue feel fizzy. And then they're pausing. Hitoshi stares up at him with wide shining eyes, the angry flush in his cheeks softening. He looks kind of silly, a red face against such pale skin. Katsuki wears the same face, though his mouth is nearly dropped open and his cheeks are always that color. He's a lot tanner too. He hasn't heard Izuku laugh like this in a while, has he? Izuku hasn't heard Izuku laugh like this in a while. There are tears in his eyes, lungs aching, and his fingers are curled into Tsuki's hand, so he won't wiggle himself right out of her grasp. A loose grin comes across Katsuki's lips moments later. He and Izuku mirroring each other. He keeps laughing in spurts, finding that he can't really stop, latching more firmly onto Aunt Tsuki's shirt as she goes on to call the other parents over. Exasperation floods her voice, probably at the mix of hysteric giggling and the way the other two have started tussling already. She pointedly takes him out of Katsuki and Hitoshi's views, but he could swear that their expressions were stamped onto the back of his eyelids. They really aren't so bad when they're not trying to one-up each other. Lightning cracks across the darkness, splitting the sky open, a bloody red. The eyes peer out at him. They're staring like they stare when he's awake, like there isn't rain pouring down his face, and he's not screaming with the thunder, like he isn't terrified. Do you see? Are you looking? Go away. What's paranoia? The moment Mom lifts the ban on the Bakugo's coming to her and Izuku's house, that happened a few days after she saw Izuku and Katsuki playing together unsupervised. And no one was hurt. Auntie sets up a play date. Katsuki, Izuku, and Hitoshi find themselves on a rug, paper and crayons in front of them. A few hours after one fantastically loud phone call, his head still kind of hurts from it. Everybody's parents are scattered along the couch and into the kitchen, having their own fun with drinking tea and talking about adult things. Hey, Katsuki. Hitoshi taps his own blank paper and stretches his legs out to lay across Izuku's lap. You remember when I figured out you were colorblind? Izuku on his part takes both the added legs and conversation topic in stride. Katsuki on his does not. By recognizing this, he can duck a split second before an entire packet of crayons soars through the space his head was in. A second one plus a pack of markers quickly follow the first two boxes, knock Hitoshi clean across the cheek, and the markers hit him right between the eyes. Katsuki's screech of rage alerts the parents in the other room. More than the surprised thing of pain that Hitoshi croaks out, Mom and Yamada rush over in a second, flat panic written all over their faces, and that causes Katsuki's roaring laughter to bubble up where curses and insults might have once. Izuku stares at him with something close to wonder in his eyes. when he should probably be checking in on his other friend. What was it again? Blue-yellow colorblindness. Hitoshi coughs waspishly, already twisting behind Izuku's now sat-up body as much as he can. Tridentopia is a fucking stupid name. Katsuki brash cackling morphs into an actual roar. Izuku throws himself flat onto the floor to save himself. Later, after the two can be pried apart, Yamada scolds Hitoshi for 1. Being mean, and 2. Swearing, though Izuku catches Auntie and Aizawa bumping fists with him after he's let off with a warning and an ice pack for his head. Katsuki has one for himself where Hitoshi's flailing arm, there ended up being a wrestling match, smacked him across the mouth. Auntie gave Hitoshi a fist bump and a hushed cheer. Now that Izuku thinks about it, Hitoshi always seems weirdly irritated after Katsuki leaves, which usually turns into sleepovers. Somehow it happens at Hitoshi's house more often than not, but sometimes Izuku finds himself curled up in his own bed instead, just with company. Sometimes, only sometimes, there are shadows that fade too slowly out of the windows at home, and his own clingy days may align with those. He tries not to mind it much, he really does. But he doesn't like being home alone when his skin is crawling for no reason. It makes him want to scratch the terrible itch away until there's nothing but bones and blood left, and Hitoshi doesn't like him when he scratches. He tries not to anymore. It's nothing concerning, only the feeling of eyes on the back of his neck in an empty house, a nightmare that leaves him tasting ash and watching his room burn down around him, his chest going tight and his throat closing up so he can't breathe. He doesn't bother to mention it since it's not a big deal. And then sometimes the prickle turns into an itch, turns into a writhing under his skin, turns into jagged nails dragged over his arms until he can see red. There are some bad days. But it's okay, there are good ones too. It's a good day when Hitoshi drags out this amazing weighted blanket that gets warm when they put in some batteries. It's good because Hitoshi always shares it with him. And neither of them make fun of each other when they wake up crying. Sometimes they just curl more into the warm blanket. Breakfast with Aizawa isn't as good as with Mom, but it'll still help a bad day turn into a better one. It usually includes awkward silence and dry toast or cereal. Hitoshi seems used to it. Izuku can't eat much in the morning anyway, and Aizawa gives them extra snacks. So he learns to get over the stale atmosphere. The snacks are especially nice when Izuku knows he won't be able to handle staying in the room during lunch. If he asks to use the bathroom, his teacher won't notice that he doesn't come back until the end of the class. Then the rare times that Yamada is home early in the morning, whether that be on weekends or school days, he makes a huge breakfast like Mom does. And that's always a great day. Sleepovers are really nice. Point blank, they start happening more and more, and at some point, he's sleeping over with Hitoshi just as often as he's in his own bed for the night. Some of his things and clothes become permanent fixtures of their house after so many weeks where he just doesn't go home. It's a stuffed bear forgotten on the couch, a plastic green clothes drawer next to Hitoshi's bigger dresser, an extra pair of red shoes next to the door with all the others. This special kind of warmth floods Izuku's chest every time he realizes the signs of his existence in their house. He didn't think he'd ever have that, you know. He never would have thought he could fit in somewhere like that. Paranoia is here, living and breathing in its own being, tacky on his tongue and sticking to the back of his teeth, settled miserably underneath his skin. It makes him feel like the floor is spinning under him, sometimes like the air might just choke out of him if he looks back. He knows he can't let them realize he can see them. He just doesn't know why. This 10-year-old quirkless boy is frankly made of nothing important, only here for his part of a small percentile, shouldn't know paranoia. He shouldn't be aware of the shadows at all, not to the point of double-checking the locks, and not writing in his notebooks in front of any windows. They stare at him while he sleeps, while he's under the rain, and all he can do is spread himself out as big as he can so they won't attack. They talk to him words that don't have voices he can hear. The syllables are like stamps that were brought down with a crack on the dark part behind his eyes. Do you see it? Look at us, see what you're so afraid of. He reaches up to his eyes. His fingers smooth over blank skin.